The Unexplained Rundown is pleased to partner with tpublic.com and bring you some fun and fantastical apparel and accessories that are truly out of this world. If you're keen to support the show and see it grow, be sure to check out some of the cool designs in the merch store and grab yourself a bargain. Use the link in the description below.
Or concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying object?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't had anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on. The flying saucers, and we've had other things, you know.
For years, the world has seen reality distorted, facts manipulated, and truth hidden. But there's even more to the story than anyone has ever suspected, because no one has been able to see the whole picture until now.
And we are live. Friends, welcome back to another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. I am your host, Grant Lembeck, and if you're new to the channel and you found it intentionally, then like me, you're intrigued by the unexplained mysteries of this mortal coil of ours, and you crave to know what's real and what is not. We've got some regulars in the house. So, Jimmy, always good to see you, my friend. We've also got, actually, you know what? The goggles have to go on because I'm still blind as a badger. We have, who have we got here? We got Zane in the house. Great to see you, my friend. Thanks for joining. Jasmine here is here as always. Great to see you, Jazz. Thanks for tuning on in. And we've got a jam-packed show for you guys tonight. So I will try and keep it under the 3-hour mark. But we've got quite a few things to cover off on. And first and foremost, as always, thank you to the generous support of all of our Patreon and YouTube members. You guys know who you are. Thank you for your ongoing support and patronage. It certainly helps support the channel and see it grow. So if you are new to the channel, or maybe you're a seasoned regular and you would like to explore some of the options that are available to you in the way of memberships for a couple of gold coins a month, you can support the channel and help it grow. So check that out in the show notes below. If you like to get your podcasts on Spotify, check us out on Spotify. We are there. And please consider giving us a rate and review if you listen regularly on Spotify. So what are we talking about tonight, folks? Well, we're talking about a lot of things, but we're going to start with a brand new Westall documentary that has come out. It's actually a documentary short. I was exposed to this only recently. A couple of folks let me know about it. Bex and a few others were kind enough to give me a heads up. Shane Ryan as well. Obviously, it was posted in the Westall Flying Saucer Incident Facebook group. Wonderful documentary. I would absolutely encourage you to check it out. It's incredibly well produced, production value, researched, comprehensive, concise, very, very sharp. It only goes for about 30 minutes. And it's from a very new and young gentleman by the name of Dhruv Paul. I think he's done a wonderful job. He's got his own channel, which he's only recently started, called Project Unknown Field Files. If you want to check it out, link is in the description below. I was very, very impressed with what Dhruv put out. Almost kind of puts the documentary that I did, the Westall Witnesses, to shame. I think he's done a really, really good job. And the way that he's approached the whole subject and the content. So we're going to have a look at some of the clips from the new documentary that he put out again on his channel. So do check it out. So let's actually start with that. And what we might do. So it's called UFOs, Aliens, and Men in Black, Westall, April 6, 1966. And I'm not going to show, obviously, the whole documentary, because obviously I want you to have an opportunity to jump on over to his channel and check it out. But we will have a look at some of the clips from the documentary just to kind of give you a frame of reference for what's included. There were a couple of new tidbits that I found in there, but it was great to see Dhruv interview Joy Clark, one of the primary witnesses, also Shane Ryan, and use some of the, I guess, archival footage that was in the documentary that Shane Ryan was a part of, Westall 66, A Suburban UFO Mystery. So let's have a look at one of the first clips from the documentary. Again, link in the show notes below. Check it out, because I think if you're new to Westall and you don't have 90 minutes of your time to sit through and watch either my direct documentary or Westall 66, it's a really good, concise introduction for you. So do check it out. So here is an introductory clip from Dhruv at Project Unknown Field Files on his new documentary, UFOs, Aliens, and Men in Black, Westall, April 6, 1966. So here we go.
Right here in Clayton South, more than 200 students and teachers said they saw a flying saucer in the sky. Minutes later, military trucks rolled in and men in suits appeared on site. Witnesses to the event say they were warned, told never to speak about what they saw. This is Australia's biggest mass UFO sighting, and for some reason, people have no idea it ever happened. Well, I do, and today I'm here to find out what really happened at Westall that day.
All right, so that's the introduction, folks. So let's rip into our first clip. What I really like about this documentary is Dhruv is actually on site, on location at Westall High School, as well as at the Grange. When I did my documentary, I didn't have an opportunity to get on the school grounds, so it was great to see that he incorporated that into the documentary. But this first clip is really Dhruv talking about one of the adult witnesses on the day of the Westall incident. Again, in the morning, the 6th of April, 1966, we all know about Andrew Greenwood, the science teacher, who went public, only a couple of years ago with Ross Coulthard, and sadly passed away, I believe, last year. But he did go public only with audio, with the researcher, the late James McDonald, and was included in James Fox's phenomenon. The phenomenon of 2020, although his face was not on camera, Andrew Greenwood. So there was another teacher that witnessed something anomalous in the skies above Westall High School on the 6th of April, 1966, and that was chemistry teacher Barbara Robbins. And her story is a fascinating one, and this is why.
Not every adult on the Oval was trying to calm the chaos. One went so far as to document it. Barbara Robbins was the chemistry teacher at Westall High in 1966. When the recess bell rang and hundreds of kids poured outside to watch the flying saucer in the sky, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed her camera and started snapping photos. According to the school captain at the time, Graham Simons, she captured several clear photos of the UFO as it hovered in the air. When the students were herded back into their classrooms after the craft subsequently took off from the Grange, Graham's job as school captain was to ensure everyone stayed within the classrooms. No students, no teachers were allowed out. But as he made his rounds in the corridor, he saw something strange. A confrontation of sorts. Down the corridor, Graham saw Headmaster Sambleby, Miss Robbins, and a man he'd never seen before. The man, he said, wore a dark blue uniform, not quite police, not quite military. What happened next shocked him. The men both demanded that Miss Robbins hand over the film, and not just the film, but the entire camera with which she shot clear photos of the craft. She tried to resist, but eventually the men took it and left. Those photos were the only known images to be taken of the Westall UFO, and were never seen again.
I was walking back from the West End. There was confrontation between Mr. Sambleby, Barbara Robbins, and a man I'd never seen before. I thought it was a police uniform, but it was just dark blue. It was demanded that she hand over not the film, but the entire camera.
Now, it's unfortunate that the late Barbara Robbins, I believe she's passed, has never come forward. There was never any testimony from her, I believe. But again, just fascinating that obviously we have a primary witness there that is, saying for the record in the Westall 66 A Suburban UFO Mystery documentary that, there was this confrontation between Barbara Robbins and the headmaster and another unknown individual, and the camera was confiscated. So if that camera captured photographic evidence of what was seen in the skies above Westall High School, then that makes the Westall incident just that much more extraordinary, and even that much more intriguing, because that evidence was confiscated. Now, what happened to that? What's happened to that evidence? Is it sitting undeveloped or developed in a filing cabinet somewhere in the Department of Defense or the Department of Supply or the CIA or some other intelligence agency? Who knows? Has it been destroyed? Will it ever see the light of day? I would certainly, if there is photographic evidence, you think that would pretty much be a shut, closed shut case if we were ever to see what was captured on camera in those photographs that were taken by chemistry teacher Barbara Robbins. That would tell us, you would think, definitively as to what it was that was saw in the sky above Westall High School on the 6th of April 1966. Was it a flying saucer, something that is otherworldly, or was it something that was prosaic, that was not readily identifiable or explainable by those that saw it? So I know that Zane's a bit of an ontological shock there moment, maybe for you, Zane, knowing that there was some photographs taken. But yes, I agree with you, Jimmy. It was a very, very well put together documentary that Dhruv has done. So, and I think the way that he attacked the subject and the way that he interviewed, Joy and Shane, I think he just did a wonder. He did his homework, obviously. I think he did a great job of tackling the Westall case, which has, as we all know, rabbit hole upon rabbit hole upon rabbit hole. So that was just that's one of the more intriguing parts of the Westall case for me. That the fact that Barbara Robbins was, it was reported that she had taken photographs on her camera, and that camera, like any good UFO case, that evidence was confiscated. So later in the documentary, Dhruv goes on to talk about talking with Shane Ryan, what happened immediately after the incident and what the students were told after the incident. So let me play this for you, because I don't want to give the clip away.
Special assembly was called.
At some point later on in the afternoon, after lunch, there was an assembly. Some remember it as being a special assembly that was called, but whichever it was, the content of the assembly that everyone remembers was that it was about what had happened. And the headmaster, Frank Sambleby, making very clear to the students that they weren't to talk about what had happened, that it had nothing to do with flying saucers because there were no such things, and he didn't want anybody saying that that's what it was. He didn't want anybody talking to the media. And basically the message that most of the students who have spoken to me remember out of that assembly was that it was being quashed, and people were feeling threatened that if they did talk about what had happened, that they would be in trouble.
Of course, we had our lovely assembly, but as I said before, when Mr. Sambleby was talking, because it's sort of like a raised platform, and that's concrete, and that's where we used to have every Monday, we'd have and do our oath to the Queen and all that stuff. And he was standing up there with the vice principal and whatever else, and behind him in the corridor, there was, because they said there was a long glass corridor, the men and lady in the blue uniform, the army, the men in dark suits, and also a policeman as well. And they were standing behind him listening to every single word he said. And I think from what he was telling us, that he'd been told to tell us that too. We were hysterical, calm down, you haven't seen anything, you are not to talk about this incident, it is not to be discussed with the press, with anybody, you just don't talk about it. You were all massively hysterical. It was a weather balloon.
That's what he said.
Really? For all those sort of people? I don't
Why would
think
the authorities be here for a weather balloon?
That's exactly right.
So there you go. That's from primary witness Joy Clark. Obviously, when she was a school student on the day, her maiden name Joy Tighe. But again, great to see Dhruv interviewing primary witness Joy at the school. That was the what is now where the sports oval was. So, very much, if any of you Melburnians do get down to Clayton South, you can actually drive around Westall High School, and it's very much, got the same sort of look and feel that it had back in 1966. Obviously, there's a lot of additions to the school. There's, I think, an amphitheater type area, but very much some of the original building structures are there, and obviously the big oval, which was the sports oval, as well as the big power line pole that was what they call it. The power lines are still there. A classic and well known throughout Melbourne. So, again, interesting that special assembly calls. Students were told to shut up about it. If it was something so prosaic like a weather balloon, like Principal Zambles who was saying, well, why was it? Why was it all hush hush if it was something that was prosaic? Was there a reputational risk to the school if it got out into the public that there was a weather balloon that crashed near the Westall High School? Well, that's not. Is that going to give the school negative press? I don't think so. They didn't cause it. They didn't have anything to do with it. So it's just strange that there was this narrative that was, an instruction that was, directed at these children to shut up about it. You're not to talk about what you've seen. So let's continue on with actually Jimmy's comment here is joy is a joy to speak to. I met her at Ross Coulthard presentation in Victoria a while back. Yeah, August 2023, I believe it was. Ross did a Q&A talk in Melbourne, and a lot of the some of the primary witnesses were there. So it's always great to be able to get together and catch up with some of the primary witnesses. There will be a special event or events to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the Westall Flying Saucer incident in April of next year. So I'll be sure to share more information as it's made available to me on what that event will look like. And you can bet your bottom dollar that there will be a good, decent number of the witnesses there on the day, so you can learn from them directly and have a chat. So let's jump on into the next clip where, just to set this up, Joy is talking about how she and the other witnesses just want the truth and verification for what it is that they saw. And then Shane Ryan goes into the detail about this secret report that was compiled by the Department of Supply on the Westall incident.
Community have often speculated that what may have been seen that day was just a
wrong one.
Of what we saw. That's what we want. We want someone who knows, and somebody does know, or there's documents or something. There is. It's got to be somebody that just come out and say, yes, something very unusual did happen that day, and this is what it involved. And
you're certain there's a government official somewhere out
there
that knows exactly what.
Yeah, absolutely. Somewhere in somebody's department or some stashed away in the. There's secret files, who knows?
We know that there was a very, very senior public servant from the Department of Supply, which was the federal government department that had the task of making sure that the Navy, Army and Air Force in Australia had everything that it needed. But there was a public servant from that department who was very highly credentialed, very intelligent person, had a lot of expertise in aircraft and electronics and weapons, and that he was given the task of investigating what happened at Westall in that very week, and to write the apparently secret report about it, a report that's never seen the light of day, but which I hope still exists in some dusty, dank file somewhere, hopefully here in Canberra. Maybe there's a copy of it somewhere else, maybe Washington, maybe London, but hopefully somewhere it still exists.
Because unfortunately, we're all getting old, and some of us have passed away, and I would love an answer before I go to God, that's for sure. So,
which makes the Westall petition all that much more important, because if you remember back to the last episode, we talked about the Westall petition that I submitted to the House of Representatives, which is it was certified as an accurate petition. We secured, was it 831 signatures, I believe, and that's now waiting to receive a formal response from the Australian Minister for Defence, the Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles. Excuse me. So as soon as I receive that response letter, I'll be sharing it with you all, so you can we can see directly what the Australian Department of Defence's response is to a call for answers and transparency and truth on the Westall incident almost 60 years later. So this last clip is, I thought, a good one because Dhruv goes into some of the explanations that have been put forth on the Westall flying saucer incident. Again, I would encourage you to check out the documentary. It's great that there are new voices, new researchers, new podcasters, and new content creators coming forward and putting this content out there, because it keeps the Westall case alive. You know, there've been Shane Ryan's obviously been the lead investigator and researcher, and Westall 66, a Suburban UFO mystery, that's been out now for more than a decade. We know that Ross Coulthard has put out some content on Westall for 7 Spotlight. James Fox in 2020, The Phenomenon. Obviously, my documentary is a couple of years old now, so it is great to see young and upcoming filmmakers and content creators putting out content that engages a brand new audience on this fascinating cold case, because it is one of certainly Australia's most significant UAPIOC cases, or certainly in the top 3, and one of the most intriguing cases around the world as well. So let's have a look at this last clip from Dhruv, and then we'll continue on with the rest of the show.
The fact, however, is that 200 kids and adults swore it wasn't.
You know what? Let me just play it from the start. Here we go.
Members of the local community have often speculated that what may have been seen that day was just a simple weather balloon. The fact, however, is that 200 kids and adults swore it wasn't. Now, kids may exaggerate a bit, but they know the difference between a balloon and a disc. This theory also doesn't explain the silence of the craft, the heat, or the landing site where there was scorched grass. The second theory is mass hysteria. Some psychologists claim that the kids all coaxed each other into believing the same thing, that they all saw a flying disc in the sky that day. But then again, there are too many details that line up exactly. There are over 200 separate witness accounts of what the children all saw that day. Now that's a lot of consistent stories for a hallucination. The third most popular theory is that the craft may have been some sort of secret military test craft. Now this one at least feels possible. Maybe a secret Cold War testing program, maybe a secret US craft in Aussie skies. However, why would they fly it over a school? Why would they silence the witnesses, who were students at the time, and why would they silence the teachers? Something doesn't add up. I mean, where has that technology gone since? And why would they fly it over a school for it never to be seen again? And hey, maybe it really was just a balloon. But if that's the case, it was one hell of a fucking balloon.
I love that line at the end there from Dhruv. He nails it. And he offers some good, raises some good plausible explanations. And, top secret tech is one that has sat with me for a while as a plausible explanation. But the high bell hypothesis, doesn't really cut the mustard, I believe, or a weather balloon option, because, and I know that some folks have mentioned this before, Bex has mentioned it and good, had some good commentary on it. But if we look at, some of the great research that Twitter handle at TPLoft2008 has done on looking at what were the weather conditions on the 5th and 6th of April 1966. And it's important that I kind of reiterate this, because it really does paint a picture as to Highbow becoming less and less of a plausible explanation for what folks saw on the 6th of April 1966, for this very reason. He says in his post, this is back in, when did he post this? Earlier this month, so the 7th of November. Given both the synoptic map for the 5th and 6th of April and official high-altitude, high-bow-specific wind studies for Mildura in April, I think it's fair to say that Westall was very unlikely to have been a high-bow balloon. And you've got wind from the west, wind from the... And so basically he goes, in this thread, showcasing some of the documentary evidence for the Project Highbow, where they had average wind speeds. Now they're only averages; they're not actuals. But he, as any good researcher, provides some supporting documentary evidence. The official synoptic maps from the Bureau of Meteorology for the 5th and 6th of April 1966. Now I can't read synoptic maps. I don't remember paying attention during my school days when we were going through synoptic charts. But if there are folks that are out there that are well versed in reading them and you're interested in the UAP topic, it would certainly be of value. TP Loft 2008 goes on, as shown, the synoptic maps for the day and routine wind patterns at ascent and float levels all indicate that a high-bow balloon would have ended up heading east-northeast from Mildura. Now, Mildura, just if you're visualizing the map of Australia, Mildura is northwest of Melbourne, and basically saying here that the wind would have ended up heading east-northeast from Mildura, with any variability at ascent and float levels pushing the balloon north, not south towards Melbourne. So it goes on to say, given Westall lies southeast of Mildura, general prevailing conditions and the specific requirements of high-bow balloon launch and recovery conditions, it is very unlikely that a high-bow balloon launched at Mildura would have ended up in Melbourne. And then obviously provided some reference material, goes on in a follow-up saying, here's the statistical information derived from test flights and prior high-bow flights in Mildura. Again, it's worth noting the general direction of airflow and float level over Mildura during in April typically is west to east, moving balloons toward Wollongong, not Melbourne. Again, Melbourne is southeast of Mildura. And he's saying that there is a typical pattern of the prevailing conditions moving balloons from west to east, taking it to Wollongong, which is southern parts of New South Wales. Goes on to say, additionally, the expected impact zone for high-bow balloons launched from Mildura in April is almost due east, a bearing of 84 to 89 degrees from Mildura. Again, includes some historical documentation on Project Highbow. Keith Basterfield chimed in, said, missing, and makes a good point and a valid point, missing is the actual ground to 90,000 feet wind speed and direction for Mildura and Melbourne 4, 5, and 6 April. No one has been able to obtain this yet. A request to the Bureau of Meteorology. And it's a good point. TP Loft goes on to say, I did contact them. However, the Bureau identified that they had no other information outside of the synoptic maps shown above. You are correct in identifying that ground to 90,000 feet figures indicated above is statistical and not actual. And obviously appreciated Keith's input. Now, I decided to put AI to the test. And obviously Grok and other AI models don't always get it right, but they are pretty good at assessing and analyzing publicly available data and coming up with some good summations. So let me show you what Grok said in terms of the accuracy of what it was that TP Loft 2008 was putting out there. So let me pull up this so you can see it on screen. Just pull up. Where's our good friend Grok? Here we go. So I posed it to Grok. Examine the meteorological. Now I got a spelling error there. Reports and synoptic charts referenced by ex-user at TP Loft 2008 in his post regarding spelling is terrible. The 5th and 6th of April 1966, and tell me how accurate his assessment is pertaining to a high-bow not being responsible for the Westall flying saucer incident. And so Grok goes on to say, TP Loft 2008 has posted extensively about the Westall UFO incident of April 6, 1966, specifically challenging the hypothesis that it was caused by a drifted high-bow from the U.S. Air Force's radiation sampling program. It's actually a joint effort, US and Australia, launched from Mildura in northwest Victoria. His key arguments, drawn from official Bureau of Meteorology reports and synoptic charts for April 5 and 6, 1966, center on flight duration limits, upper level wind patterns, and predicted drift zones. I'll break down his reference materials and evaluate the accuracy of his claims. So without going into, obviously, the evidence that T.P. Loft referenced in his posts, there we go. So T.P. Loft's assessment was that high bow flight 292 was not responsible, and basically you're reiterating reasons why based on what T.P. Loft had put forth. So what was Grock's assessment? Accuracy of his assessment. T.P. Loft 2008's analysis is in bold, highly accurate and well substantiated based on primary sources. The Bureau of Meteorology charts confirm northerly easterly upper winds, ruling out a southeast drift to Westall. His interpretation of wind barbs and ridge dynamics is meteorologically sound. The 8-hour limit aligns with declassified high bow specs, making the more than 24-hour timeline implausible without evidence of an anomalous long float. None exists for Flight 292. Distance exceeds the 50 to 100 mile norm by over 400 kilometers, and no US Australian records link this flight to Melbourne, despite FOIA searches yielding launch confirmations but no drifts. So Keith Basterfield's research was able to confirm, through documents that he secured for release through FOIA, that there was a flight scheduled for the 5th of April 1966. That's the flight 292, which there's never been any documentary evidence about what happened to it. We know that it was scheduled for launch, but what happened to flight 292? Critics of the high bow theory, including T.P. Loft, note that while balloons explain some 1960s sightings, there was a 1968 Sydney case, Westall's mass witness accounts, multiple disc-shaped objects, hovering rapid maneuvers, and a landing with military response don't match, this is an important point, don't match a single drifted balloon's passive behavior. His posts add rigor to debunking this explanation, strengthening the case for an unexplained aerial phenomenon. If new upper air soundings, e.g. from the Bureau of Meteorology radio sonders, emerge, they could refine this further, but current data supports his conclusion. So you've got there some data. Now, it's not definitive, but some data that suggests that high bow is less likely as the real explanation for what was observed in the sky above Westall High School on the 6th of April 1966. And that is fascinating. I've actually, not just me, but Shane Ryan and others, we've tried our best to find documentation on not just Westall, but also high bow. What happened? What was the fate of Flight 292? And I've actually tracked down there is correspondence for the Department of Supply pertaining to Project High Bow from 1966 to 1968, records that have never been examined. I've requested that they now be examined. They're located in Melbourne, and it can take a couple months for those documents because there's a lot of records to be examined. And obviously, if there's anything that's still sensitive or is of national security concern, they obviously have to redact that information. So they do have to do a thorough examination. But hopefully in the new year, I will have an opportunity to get down to the Melbourne office where this correspondence from 1966 to 68 is housed and actually review these never before examined and never before seen documents. Now, could that yield no fruit? Absolutely. I've examined documents before that hadn't been released and they didn't yield any information. But if it is a potential breadcrumb, I think it's one worth following up. So I'll keep you posted certainly on that front. I got a couple folks. Colin, always good to see you, my friend. UAP Aotearoa, welcome. Good question that was asked by Telekinetic. What should be our next steps if the petition is denied? Could we use the response as a marketing piece news article as a missive for greater transparency disclosure? Absolutely. And that's what I've been saying for a while, is that while I don't have any confidence that we will actually see an independent inquiry be established, I don't see the government wanting to spend any money investigating an incident that was over 60 years old. But if there is a formal written response that addresses the petition, which is specifically about Westall, and it references Westall in that written response from the Minister for Defence, Richard Marles. That'll be the first official government document that references Westall. And I think that can be used to garner greater support and awareness of the Westall incident leading into the 60th anniversary next year. That can help bolster greater interest from the news media. We know that there have been a number of media outlets, Channel 9, The Today Show, news.com.au, the Dandenong Star. These folks have all reported on the petition, and I don't see why they would not report on the Westall 60th anniversary in April next year. And this could be used to foster greater support and further efforts to advocate for an explanation be provided by the Australian government, the Australian Department of Defence. It doesn't also stop you from reaching out to your elected representatives. You can reach out to your member of parliament. You can reach out to your senator and say, look, 60 years ago, something truly extraordinary happened in the skies above Westall High School that was a security concern, a safety of flight risk, with Moorabbin Airport being so close, and it was a real risk to people and property. Something was reported to have come down in a wooded area south of the Grange, and if it was something prosaic, why was there such a rapid military response? Why were witnesses intimidated, told to shut up about it? Why were witnesses get knocks on their door from uniformed and non-uniformed people in military and government? Andrew Greenwood being the example, being told to shut up about it. Why was evidence confiscated? Why has no documentary evidence ever seen the light of day, particularly the Department of Supply's report that was a top secret report on the Westall incident? Why has the government and Department of Defence never come forward with an explanation for what it was if it was so prosaic? Surely if it was some top secret test or new craft that was being tested by the US or the Australian military, well, you would think that surely that technology is rudimentary now. So why not come clean and be transparent with the Australian public and those 200 witnesses that have lived with what they've seen for now almost 60 years? They deserve the truth as much, if not more, than we do as concerned and interested citizens. So, and it might just also, motivate folks within the Australian Department of Defence to get off their ass and actually review their long-held position on UAP, that move along, folks, there's nothing to see here. Australia hasn't been taking the topic of UAP seriously since it washed its hands and said, look, we know what's in our airspace, nothing to worry about with unusual aerial sightings, UAP, UFOs. There is no compelling scientific or other compelling reason to devote resources to the investigation of UAP. Well, if it wasn't a prosaic Project Highball launching that was behind Westall, well, what was it? And that, I think, can be an argument that can be put forth that it was something that was truly anomalous, that up to 200 people saw, and it's unresolved to this day. Well, there is a compelling reason for you to review your position on UAP and take what the US and other countries around the world seriously, in that UAP needs to be treated as a national security threat and safety of flight risk first and foremost, because if you can't identify it, you don't know what its intent is. So you have to treat it with you got to do due diligence and treat it with the respect that it could potentially be something that is nefarious or a threat, whether it's a foreign adversary or a prosaic object that presents a safety of flight risk to civilian or military aircraft. When we're talking about threats, we're not just talking about, well, the hostile intent. Hostile intent is quite different from a threat. Safety of flight threat could just be something like, well, the operations of an aircraft are in jeopardy because of an errant balloon or an object that's in the flight path of a plane. We're talking about national security threat. That's when we bring into play, well, what are the intentions of our foreign adversaries, like a China or a Russia? Is there hostile intent if it was a foreign adversarial system? But if it's something that was truly exotic and anomalous that cannot be explained by prosaic explanations, then you have to treat that with the greatest of respect and think, well, if we don't know what it is, we better find out what it is, because we don't know why it's here, what it's doing, where it's from, what its intent is. You can't just assume that, oh yeah, it's all love and light. I don't think that's the approach that you should take. You have to proceed with caution. Now, I know a lot of people don't agree with that assessment, but I do echo the sentiments of those in the US, in Congress and Department of Defense that say, well, if we can't identify something in our airspace, that's a concern. That's an issue. So that's my rant just gone, but that's a good question that you asked there, Telekinetic. Zane, did they mention the claim about it was the CSIRO testing light bouncing off clouds? I've never heard that that hypothesis. Don't know much about that one. I'd have to hit up Shane Ryan to see, or Keith or Bill Chalker at Kid Bassfield, see if they've heard about that one. I have not heard it. Colin goes, the kids didn't coach the guy at the market garden. There was no high bow launch that would match. Why threaten teachers? Why military on site? Exactly. All good questions. Short Order Cook, welcome. Thanks for joining. Good to see you as always. I think we're pretty much up to date. Or Harry Bridges, 1966, a big year of anniversaries. Tully Nest in January too, only a few months before the Westall incident. Intriguing that there's only a few, separated by a few months. Telekinetic, if a teacher was threatened with defamation today by uniformed and suited individuals, there would be an investigation, and for valid, lawful reasons, and the law doesn't have an expiration date. Yeah, I think we live in a very different time now where there is such a distrust in our institutions with everything that's happened with the pandemic, and there is just a lack of trust by not just folks in Australia but in the UK and the US. I think it was a different time back then. We'd come out of obviously the Second World War. We're into the Cold War with Russia, but I'd say that was probably, even though it was the 60s, there might have been a little bit more acceptance and respect for authority. I don't know. I wasn't born until 1979, but if there are some older folks out there that were alive and well back in the day, be interested to get your perspective on that part. Mark Shed Talker, do you think the UFO topic is starting to gain more traction in the mainstream media, more so in the US? Absolutely. I mean, look at what we're seeing in the news media these days. From you've got the rise of News Nation, you've got Fox News, you've got now independent media, Tucker Carlson, what he's doing, Megyn Kelly. They're talking about it. Joe Rogan, they're talking about the UAP/UFO topic a hell of a lot more than pre-2017. So I think the rise of social media, citizen journalism, citizen activism, boutique independent news media leading the charge. I mean, more often than not, X is on the forefront of breaking news on the UAP/UFO topic. We're the ones that know about things first before it's put out by the news media. And I do think documentaries like The Age of Disclosure has the potential to expose a massive, a greater audience to the UAP/UFO topic, which is still largely an uninformed public. We know about it because we're well, engaged on the topic, and I think it's certainly, in my lifetime, it's certainly, I don't ever remember growing up as a kid or even as a young adult seeing the UAP/UFO topic receive as much coverage as it does today by the news media. Now, sadly, there's still a degree of stigma. You just got to listen to the bloody X-Files theme that they'll still play. That little air of ridicule and stigma still lingers and persists. but I think it's certainly being talked about much more today than it's ever been, and it feels more comfortable to have a conversation about it. Now we're kind of going down a different route with the age of disclosure, where they're talking about NHI, you're going above and beyond. We know that UAPs are real. Well, they're now going to the path, well, this is what this is behind UAP. And we'll talk about the age of disclosure as we get in a little later on. AU Fawn, Victoria, what I find most frustrating about this case is the confiscation of the teacher's camera, not just her film. It's obviously an illegal act, and we have the right to see those images. Yeah, there could be a petition, launched to request that that photographic evidence that was confiscated. If it was confiscated unlawfully, illegally, then that's certainly something. Oh, that's George. Great to see you, George. Thanks for tuning in. For those that don't know, George has done a wonderful book on the Frederick Valentich case. I believe it was Nothing on Radar. Yeah, great job, George, with that book, and I've certainly encouraged people to have a read of it if they're interested in the Frederick Valentich case. I've also seen it being discussed on podcast shows that have never covered this topic before. There you go. So you do have a lot more folks, I think, talking about the UAP UFO topic, and I think a lot more people are much more comfortable to talk about it as well. I certainly know I am with my friends and family. It's accepted now that UAP is a thing. We don't know what it is. I certainly don't know what it is. I know that there are others that purport to know what it is. NHI, they're saying that evidence is classified. Well, we're not exposed to classified information, so we kind of have to, tread with caution, because you can't just accept claims on blind faith. I think you have to ask questions in good faith. So that's just some, I thought, very, very interesting documentary that Drew had done, Drew Paul, on the Westall case. Great to see, again, a young upcoming filmmaker do some good work on Westall. So if you're interested, do check it out. I will finish up and say, I know I always give it a bit of a shameless plug, but if you are interested to hear some of the long form commentary from the primary witnesses in greater detail, do check out the documentary that I did a couple of years ago. There's still some great testimony and commentary in there from the witnesses. It's not about me. It was about them and their recollections and memories of what happened that day on the 6th of April, 1966. And it's kind of about me and in learning from them and going on a journey to better understand the Westall incident. So do check it out if it's of interest. All right. Now, quick shout out. Like, share, and subscribe, folks. If you haven't already, a lot of folks that watch the Unexplained Rundown, you're not a subscriber. So hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell if you want to receive a heads up whenever I go live, premiere a new video, or post something on a channel. Feel free to do that if you wish. All right, we will come to the age of disclosure a little later on, so we'll star your comment there, Colin. But let's now use that as an opportunity to get into the rundown and talk about some news close to home and abroad. So a couple of days, or earlier this month, I believe it was, there was an AMA, an Ask Me Anything, that Ryan Graves, who we know congressional testified before Congress in 2023 alongside David Grush and David Fravor, and he is now leading the charge for advocating for safety of flight, that UAP needs to be taken seriously from a safety of flight perspective. And so what was this? On the 10th of November, Americans for Safe Aerospace put out, "We're live. Ryan Graves and Michael Lembeck, Ph.D, are hosting a Reddit AMA, talking pilot reports, UAP data, and what's next for Americans for Safe Aerospace." So why I post this, why it's interesting, I didn't have a chance to check out the Reddit AMA, but Jimmy did. So kudos to you, Jimmy, for checking it out. And I won't read through, obviously, everything on the page, but we'll say what's happening at Americans for Safe Aerospace. More than 1,000 first-hand UAP reports have now been collected from aircrew veterans and other credible witnesses. Reports are being published. Key reports are being presented to members of Congress, partner agencies, researchers to help inform policy investigations, public understanding. ASA continues to grow. It supports the Safe Airspace for Americans Act, and they're still in their early days. But if we do a quick, I'm just going to do a. This was a great question that was asked by Jimmy. Is this strictly a US database of 1,000 first-hand UAP reports that have now been collected from aircrew veterans and other credible witnesses? Have you received any data from Australia or another country? Cheers. Response from Ryan. Yes, we have received reports from nearly all parts of the world, from Peru to Greenland, Japan, South Africa, and Australia, and more. So that got me interested in doing a bit of a show about, well, what is the Australian Aviation Authority, CASA, the Civilian or Civil Aviation Safety Authority, the ATSB, the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, Airservices Australia. What are these folks doing when it comes to UAP and safety of flight? So that's a good segue into what Americans for Safe Aerospace reported on only earlier this month. We know that the Federal Aviation Administration in the United States, the FAA, had changed basically its policy around the definition of, or the use of the word UAP. They've moved away from unidentified flying object, UFO, and they've now adopted the terminology unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP. So they're updating their policy in alignment with what Congress and ARO are now referring to as UAP. So Americans for Safe Aerospace put out, Americans for Safe Airspace or Aerospace, oh, I might have got it wrong there, but let's pull up the article that they had put out. There we go. It is Americans for Safe Aerospace. So 7th of November, article that Americans for Safe Aerospace put out. The FAA quietly updated its UAP reporting policy, and that's a good thing. FAA recently made a quiet but important change to how it handles unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP. The new policy replaces the outdated UFO terminology and instructs air traffic controllers to report UAP observations through existing safety and security channels. While the FAA has acknowledged unusual area events in the past, this is the first time UAP reporting has been formally written into the agency's air traffic control procedures. That means UAP observations are now recognized as part of everyday aviation safety operations, not something to ignore or dismiss. A step towards openness. For decades, pilots and air traffic controllers have had limited guidance on how to handle sightings they could not explain. Many avoided reporting altogether out of concern for how it might be perceived. By placing UAP reporting within its core safety framework, the FAA is signaling that these observations are worthy of the same professionalism and attention as any other in-flight safety issue. And that's a very, very good point. That matters for aviation safety. When pilots and controllers can document what they have seen without fear of stigma, that information becomes data. Data can be analyzed, patterns can be recognized, and the aviation community can better understand what is happening in our shared airspace. The next goal is the Safe Airspace for Americans Act. The FAA's update is a meaningful step forward, but is not the end goal. The Safe Airspace for Americans Act, introduced in Congress in September 2025, aims to expand on this foundation. The bill would require the FAA to create a standardized national system for collecting and analyzing UAP reports from pilots, air traffic controllers, flight attendants, maintenance crews, dispatchers, and airport staff, much like ARO has done with the US Department of Defense. It would also require the FAA to coordinate with other agencies, protect aviation professionals from retaliation, and develop a public communication strategy to reduce the stigma around reporting. Most importantly, it ensures that reporting a UAP cannot jeopardize a pilot's medical or airman certificates or their career. And we know that stigma is alive and well with respect to UAP in an Australian context. Why would F-35 pilots or air crews want to report an observation of UAP when, one, there's no reporting mechanism in place, no one to investigate their report of UAP. They're not encouraged to report any aircraft that they cannot identify. And we know from Penny Wong's comments in 2022 that the UAP topic is not one that she takes seriously. And I know Jimmy has a fond affiliation or a fondness for Penny Wong, so is a proud wearer of the Penny Wong t-shirt. So let's continue on. Building a culture of transparency at Americans for Safe Aerospace. We see the FAA's move as part of a larger shift towards openness. Each step like this helps aviation professionals feel supported when they speak up. The more we normalize transparent reporting, the stronger the safety culture becomes. If you have seen something you're not explained, you can confidently report through ASA's reporting platform. And it's great that they have a mechanism that allows for people to report. Every report helps us move closer to a clearer, safer understanding of what is in our skies. So bravo to Americans for Safe Aerospace. I applaud their advocacy and their efforts. And if you're interested to see specifically the document that with a reporting policy that went through a change, this is the document, just so you can see when no one's making anything up. 26th of October, 2025, U.S. Department of Transportation, FAA. This notice reflects the change from the previously known term unidentified flying object to unidentified anomalous phenomena and the reporting of UAP activities. It goes on to say, inform the operation supervisor, CIC, of any reported observed unidentified anomalous phenomena, unexplained phenomena activity. Background: on the 22nd of December 2022, the establishment of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office created and defined the term unidentified anomalous phenomena, which effectively, for government purposes, replaced the term unidentifying flying object. In addition, Section 3373 identifies UAPs as a potential national security concern and establishes agency requirements for collecting reports of UAP incidents, including the FAA. As a result, the FAA will require Air Traffic Control, ATC, to notify the National Tactical Security Operations Air Traffic Security Coordinator Team on the Domestic Events Network of any pilot reports or air traffic personal observations of UAP activity. Now, miles miles and miles ahead and in front of where Australia is, CASA, ATSB, and Airservices Australia. And that's where we're going to transition to now, because I want to show you exactly how inadequate the Australian approach is to pilots, aviators, air crew, air traffic controllers reporting UAP. So let's have a look at, we'll jump on over to the Civil Aviation Safety Authority's website, CASA. And if you're wondering who CASA is and what they do, basically their remit, a little bit small on the screen. So let me zoom it in. CASA is a government body that ensures the safety of aviation in Australia. We license pilots, register aircraft, certify aerodromes, oversee aviation safety, and promote safety awareness. We do this by setting standards and safety outcomes that cover maintenance, airspace, aerodromes, licensing, all types of operations. And we'll leave it at that. So that's basically what they do. So and what's interesting is one of the documents that I was able to secure for release through FOIA was a number of years ago, and I've received a number of updates since I received it back in 2022, is the Chief of Air Force brief on UAP. And so this is, actually, before we do that, let me just show you an email. This is from, what is this from? I'll show you this. This is an email that I sent to the on the 12th of January of 2024 to CASA Media. I basically was asking, I was saying that, in the United States, this is back again in January 2024, proposed legislation was introduced that would require US civilian and commercial pilots to report observations of UAP to the FAA. On consideration of the proposed legislation, could CASA kindly provide comment on the following? If the proposed legislation is passed, what are the implications for CASA in the event US aircraft operating in Australia airspace, inbound or outbound, observe UAP and are required to report to the FAA? Will CASA commit to reviewing its current reporting protocols and consider implementing comparable UAP recording mechanisms? The response from media, official, thank you for your inquiry. The following can be attributed to a CASA spokesperson. Short and sweet, CASA's role as a government body is to regulate Australian aviation safety. The reporting of UAP is currently out of our remit. So no reporting on UAP within the remit or interest of the Civil Aviation Safety Authority. It's a bit of a strange comment to make there, that it's out of your remit, considering that the Chief of Air Force brief that has been secured for release through FOIA goes on to say this. And we'll have a look at, let's have a look at page 9. It says this. Process protocol to report UAP UFO in Australia airspace. I'll just go there was no specific, this is in the Australian Department of Defence, there is no specific encouragement given to pilots to report aircraft they can identify. That doesn't seem, that seems completely backwards, considering that's exactly specifically what the US Department of Defense and FAA want people to do. If they cannot identify an aircraft in American airspace, you got to report it. Defense safety of flight incidents, including those potentially posed by a UAP, are handled by the Defense Aviation Safety Authority, DASA, with civilian safety of flight incidents, the purview of the Civil Aviation Safety Authority. So there's a little bit of a contrast there to what CASA is saying when compared to documentation from the Australian Department of Defence. So let's move on. So let's have a look at this is on CASA's website. Let me pull this up so I've got the right one. This is, they have this on their website regarding hazard identification and management in aviation. So on this page, you'll get information on weather, volcanic ash, low light, visual night flying, wildlife, National Runway Safety Group, fatigue, turbulence, wire strike, related content. A hazard is a condition or object with the potential to cause or contribute to an aircraft incident or accident. And we know that's true of UAP. Effective risk management through safety management practices is a fundamental part of successful aviation operations. Effective risk management is achieved by having a complete understanding of the relevant hazards. Well, they're not even acknowledging that UAP is something to be concerned about, because there is no recognition of UAP in any of the documentation that sits in the holdings of CASA. Safety risk assessment, safety risk mitigation, risk acceptance. Examples of significant and typical aviation-related hazards include meteorological, weather, volcanic ash, low light night flying, wildlife hazards, runway safety, fatigue. Goes on to weather, volcanic ash, low light, visual, wildlife. Nothing about, no mention of UAP there. UAP is not something that is of a concern to CASA, yet it is for the FAA, and it is for the United States Department of Defense. Why is the Civil Aviation Safety Authority in Australia completely burying its head in the sand, like the Australian Department of Defense, when it comes to the safety of flight risk, the safety of flight issues that UAP pose? Because you only have to remember back to the ODNI's preliminary assessment on UAP on the 25th of June, 2021, 11 near misses because of UAP, 11. And Australia's like, she's all good, folks. Don't worry. She'll be right, mate. Nothing to worry about here in our airspace. Are you sure about that? Well, we're gonna have a look. So let's now jump on into. This is what CASA provides. Let's see if I can find it. Which one was it? Here we go. This is this is all public domain. This is all open source stuff. I found this on their website. The Civil Aviation Safety Authority, a kind of a card. What they call it? They call it a accident incident reporting card that is available to pilots. Why is reporting important? What needs to be reported to the Australian Transport Safety Bureau? What is immediately reportable? Routine reportable. Examples include near collision requiring avoidance maneuver. And then it goes on to who must report, what happens to my report, and so on. Well, all reports are investigated, but again, there's nothing that we've seen thus far that even mentions UAP. So if someone says in the report, I saw your UAP, or I had to maneuver to avoid a collision, where does that go? Where does that report go? Do they have someone that investigates that? What do they do with it? I don't know, because there's no UAP reporting is not in the remit of CASA. So what happens to a report that goes to the ATSB? Well, let's have a look. So let's use that as an opportunity to drill down into just what the Australian Transport Safety Bureau exactly do. So about the ATSB. The a little bit small, so I'll leave it there as it is for the moment. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau improves safety and public confidence in aviation, marine and rail transport through our independent, no blame investigation of transport accidents and safety occurrences, safety data recording, analysis and research, and influencing safety action through fostering safety awareness. Won't read the rest, but that's basically what they do. All right. Well, keeping that in mind, what does the ATSB have to say about UAP in terms of incident and accident reporting? Well, let's have a look at the aviation reporting requirements for the ATSB. Environment-related aircraft incidents, so external examples, and this is where you think UAP would live. Well, they have bird strike or animal strike. What is that? That's a collision between an aircraft and an animal or a bird. Whoops. Let me come back to where my site was there. I've just lost my page. There we go. So includes bird strikes, where the aircraft is in flight, taking off or landing, bird strike, and animal strikes where a carcass is found on the runway, excludes near strikes. We actually, you know what, let's zoom it on in so it's a bit easier on the eyes. There we go. Where were we? So we have examples of environment-related aircraft incident, a collision. Now, this is where you think something about UAP would live. Collision or near encounter with flying object. Well, if it's an unidentified flying object, if it's UAP, then why is there no reference to it here? Collision or near encounter with a flying object when the object interrupts flight or is sighted in the proximity of an aircraft. Now, that's where I believe UAP should live as terminology. Includes collision or near encounter with any RPA or model aircraft or parachute. But there's no reference of UAP, even though the terminology UAP is now recognized by the FAA and it's recognized in congressional legislation in the US. All right, well, there's nothing, that's where we think it would live, but it doesn't live there because there's no reference. Interference from ground. Near encounter between an airborne aircraft and an object when the object interrupts the aircraft's flight path, or a laser or a spotlight being directed at the airborne aircraft that affects the flight, or an unauthorized communication signal or system interference directed at an aircraft, air traffic control, or air navigation aid. And then you have other environmental issues that affect the safety of flight. Includes insect nests or bodies, or dirt, sand blocking pitot tubes. So no formal recognition whatsoever by the Australian Transport Safety Bureau of UAP. Again, even though it is formally acknowledged and recognized by the FAA and Congress in terms of legislation and reporting. Well, let's have a look at some of the ATSB reports historically that include UFO reporting, because there have been UFO reports, even though UFO is not terminology that's formally recognized by CASA, by the ATSB, and we'll talk about Airservices Australia in just a moment. So let's have a look at this first report. So this is documents that were secure released through FOIA in 2014, 2015 from the ATSB. And I'm going to jump down to page, just to show you, these are all historical reports. When the occurrence occurred, what was the description. And so in all of these reports, there is only one, this is 42 pages, there is only one report that references UFO. And this was, let's see, occurrence was the 5th of July. Actually, let me zoom in so it's a little easier on the eyes here. Oops. So 5th of July, 2014. It was reported, does it say when it was reported? It happened in Brisbane. Summary, possible UFOs sighted at Suncorp Stadium. Pilot of, redacted, after landing, AF called with the following information, redacted, tracking from redacted, when at about A015 was advised by crewmen that there was possibly a flying object in the area of Suncorp, at Suncorp Stadium, where the Broncos play, NRL, up in Queensland, at about A006. Aircraft turned to investigate, but nothing was seen by pilot under NVG. Crewmen thought it was a UAV, unmanned aerial vehicle. I think that's what that relates to, or uncrewed. Nothing was painted on the TMA radar. The area was on the border of Control Zone and Class G airspace. So that was the controlling authority was Airservices. So this is obviously a pilot called air traffic control with this information. And so this was then escalated to the ATSB. So out of all of these reports in this 42-page document, there's only one report where the use of the word UFO is used. A lot of the other ones have unknown, unidentified. And why do I mention this? Because terminology is important. And the fact that there is no acknowledgement or recognition of UAP or UFO by CASA, ATSB, and Airservices Australia doesn't mean that there aren't reports of UAP that are submitted. They more often and likely are, but they don't have the terminology of UFO, UAP. One of the reasons why could be to avoid stigma. Again, it's not a term that is formally recognized by any of these authorities, CASA, ATSB, and Airservices Australia. So that was one report that I found interesting, just a historical report. Let's have a look at another series of reports. This one, these are historical. So there's, some of these are back in the early 2000s. This is 2004. Again, you've got airspace incident. There's a ton of these. So I'm just going to jump to the one that I want to show you. Let's go to page 11. So this is an incident in 2007. Now, logged in 2007. So it occurred on the 26th of April, 2005, but didn't get logged until 2007. Don't know what that's about. Goes into the details. The pilot of redacted took avoiding action when they thought they saw something go past them in opposite direction, less than 500 feet below at 2356 and 4 nautical miles north of Mount Sandon. The pilot of redacted thought they saw traffic just below them coming towards them. They commenced a turn to the right to avoid the object, then turned back to the left to see behind and attempt to identify what it was. The pilot subsequently reported that it was a red and white object traveling very fast, but it could not be identified for certain as an aircraft. There was no other known traffic to the air traffic ATS system. Was it air traffic safety system? Or we'll see what the ATS, the acronym, is in a moment. Within 12 nautical miles of the aircraft, and there was no cloud. The sun at the time was high, and to the rear left the direction of travel. Air situation playback, ASPB, confirmed that there were no other Mode C SSR returns. Again, some of the terminology I'm not aware of. The area is outside of primary radar coverage. The pilot thought that he saw traffic just below and coming towards his aircraft. He turned right to avoid the traffic, then turned left after it had passed in an attempt to identify. The pilot later reported that it was a red and white object that was traveling at a very high speed. He could not confirm the object as an aircraft. ATS had no known traffic within 12 nautical miles. The sun was high, and to the rear of the left of the aircraft's direction of travel, and the sky was clear of cloud. Air situation playback confirmed that there was no other Mode C SSR returns from the area, kind of consistent with the paragraph above. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a UAP. It means it just was something that was not able to be identified. But the fact that it's red and white, traveling very fast, no tracks on radar, and just an interesting report in the context of what we're talking about when it comes to UAP UFO. Let's have a look at some of another report. This one, some of these are from, there's a talking a little bit further on. This is 2013. Again, we've got a ton of reports. I'm just going to jump to the one that's of interest for us. And I just went through these, and kind of went through them relatively quickly. So, I didn't read through every single report because it would have been taking a while to go through them. But these are the ones that just I found interesting. Let's have a look. Okay, so 28th of May, 2014. Serious incident, near collision between an unknown object and a de Havilland near Perth Airport, Western Australia, 19th of March, 2014, a few months before it was reported. Serious incident, mid-air collision potential. So what happened? On 19th of March, 2014, at approximately 9:13 Western Standard Time, a de Havilland DHC-8 registered VXX FX was on approach to Perth Airport from Kambalda, Western Australia, when about 23 kilometres northeast of Perth, at about 3,800 feet above sea level. The crew sighted a bright strobe light directly in front of the aircraft. The light appeared to track towards the aircraft, and the crew realized that the light was on an unknown object, possibly an unnamed aerial vehicle. The pilot took evasive action, turning towards the west to avoid a collision with the object. The object passed about 20, I think that's meters horizontally and 100 feet vertically from the aircraft. The pilot reported the object was cylindrical in shape and grey in color. It was about 3,700 feet above. Is that above sea level? I think that means, above mean sea level, and in controlled airspace. The crew did not receive a traffic collision avoidance system TCAS alert. The airspace was below 3,500 feet above mean sea level was military restricted airspace. The the Australian Transport Safety Bureau was advised that the Australian Defence Force was not operating UAVs and was not aware of any UAV operations in the area at the time of the incident. The ATSB was not able to confirm the details of the object or identify any UAV operator in the area at that time. Now, again, doesn't necessarily mean that it was it's a very, very interesting case. Now, could it have been a UAP? Well, based on the description, and based on what I've read, it certainly has the potential to be. So again, why is there, there is no acknowledgement of UAP as something that there should be concern of? And I find that to be really, really strange. Why not just the Australian Department of Defence, but also the Australian safety authorities are just burying their heads in the sand on this topic? It just makes no sense to me. Well, let's have a look at another historical report. This one was one that I was able to track down in the National Archives. And let me see where, should we find this one? Here we go. This was in the year 2000. Executive summary: 2 high-flying aircraft reported sighting unidentified object direction traffic above. Description, whatever those acronyms are, were flying 25 miles apart at F390 at ATS Q94, heading for Melbourne. At 50 nautical miles north of Parkes, HYL asked Melbourne Centre, what is the opposite direction traffic just in front of us? There was no known traffic in the area and radar displayed no return. Both aircraft reported sighting the strobe lights of an unidentified aircraft travelling opposite direction and above. When asked how far above, HYL replied, it's difficult to tell. Above 40,000 feet. Now, 40,000 feet, is that the ceiling that a commercial aircraft can reach? So you've got something above 40,000 feet with strobe lights traveling in the opposite direction. That sounds a bit odd, certainly to me. And this was an Ansett Australia flight departing from Brisbane, headed for Melbourne. Now, again, no use of the word UFO. Back then would have been UFO or I don't know, unidentified object, but they've reported of an unidentified close proximity traffic. Now, again, does the terminology constantly change that they use for reporting? I mean, unidentified is certainly a word that, or unknown is a word that I suspect is still one that's used to this very day. And if you were to go through all of those ATSB reports, you'll see the words unknown and identified repeatedly. So let's have a look at, and I know that a lot of you had made some comments there, so I want to come to those, but I just want to fly through what we're talking about here. Let's now have a look at Airservices Australia. What is Airservices Australia and what do they do? So Airservices Australia, zoom on in, is a government-owned organisation responsible for safely and efficiently managing air traffic in 11% of the world's airspace, as well as the provision of aviation rescue firefighting services at Australia's busiest airports. So basically, they're the ones that look after all the air traffic control, essentially. We are regulated by CASA and work closely with our customers and industry to support the long-term growth of our aviation industry. So if they're the folks that are managing air traffic control, you would think that, well, what if a pilot does report something that they can't identify in Australian airspace? If there was that Ansett flight, unidentified, or if it was one of those, a flight today, if the pilot was not able to identify something that they saw in their flight path, do they report it to air traffic control? You would certainly think they would report something, but would they report it as UFO, UAP? Well, it doesn't sound like it, because that terminology is not acknowledged by CASA, ATSB, and Airservices Australia. So let's have a look at, now let's turn over to Jimmy. So Jimmy, good on him for taking it upon himself to submit a Freedom of Information Act request to Airservices Australia. And this was, obviously I've redacted Jimmy's email for his privacy, but if we have a look at, this was, what was the date of this this response? This was the 5th of September this year, so not too long ago. So Jimmy had requested access to the following documents held by Airservices Australia for the period of January 1, 2010 to the present. I believe these documents are relevant to the topic of unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, and unidentified flying object. Part 1, I want copies of records of reports and incidents using certain terminology and keywords, namely UFO, UAP, unknown vehicles, unknowns, any unusual or unexplained radar returns, excluding previous FOIA requests and inquiries from public requesting information surrounding. And part 2, I want to see what policies and procedures you have in place pertaining to reporting mechanisms and forms that a pilot, air traffic controller, or other staff member would use to report an observation of UFO, UAP, or other unknown aerial phenomenon. Now, they identified 2 documents as failing within the scope of the request. And so what did Airservices Australia provide or deliver to Jimmy? So this is what they came back to him on. This was ATS occurrence, a notification report. This is Airservices Australia's notification report for the incident. Now, I'll jump down to the one that's of interest because they had actually provided the notification report for that ATSB report that we already looked at. This, you know, the one I mentioned, Suncorp Stadium. Well, this is the notification report that went to Airservices Australia. Possible UFO sighted at Suncorp Stadium. Pilot of redacted after landing AF called with the following information. Redacted tracking from Royal. So this is different information in here. Tracking from Royal Brisbane Hospital to Archerfield when at about AO 15 was advised by crewmen that there was possibly a flying object in the area of Suncorp Stadium at about A006. Aircraft turned to investigate, but nothing was seen by pilot under NVG. Crewmen thought it was a UAV. Nothing was painted on the TMA radar. The area was on the border of control zone and Class G airspace. So this is the only report. There's 7 pages of reports. And if, in actual fact, this is pretty much the only one that they've provided that matches that the scope of the request being UFOs. So if this tells me that if pilots are reporting observations of unknown objects or unidentified objects in Australian airspace, well, they're not really reporting it as a UFO. There's no use of the word UFO. Now, does that mean that they're not seeing activity of UFO, UAP? Well, could be. Or they're just not reporting it using the word UFO because they know the baggage that is attached to the word UFO and the stigma and ridicule that's attached to it as well. Now, this is just my personal opinion based on my research that I've done on the Australian Department of Defence's lack of interest and engagement on this topic. So let's use that as a chance to have a look at a FOIA request that I had submitted to Airservices Australia. This is, let's have a look at, we'll go to this one. And I'm just keeping the ball rolling. Sorry if I'm going, I haven't answered any questions as of yet because we're speeding through all of this. So this was on, when did they send me this? This was only recently. So I refer to your email of 24th of October. I requested copies of any current guidelines, protocols, or training materials provided to military and civilian air traffic controllers and aircrew for reporting unusual or unexpected aerial activity, including potential unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, otherwise known as unidentified aerial phenomena, unidentified flying objects, or unusual aerial sightings. What did they say? They said, I've identified one document as falling within the scope of the request. So let's have a look at what they provided. Now, again, don't be surprised when you see this is very consistent with what is currently published on CASA's website, the ATSB's website. It's very, very comparable in the sense that this is at least a current document. This is the Safety Management System Objective and Requirements, effective of the 22nd of May this year. So this is a very recent current document. There's a lot of stuff that's redacted in here. Occurrence definitions is what we're going to look at. So occurrence definitions, air traffic services, that's what ATS is. Air traffic services occurrence definitions. An ATS occurrence is any event that affected or could have affected ATS operational safety. ATS occurrences are categorized according to Table 2. And so what do they document? Well, abnormal operations. They've redacted one part as S22s as being irrelevant to the scope of the request, not too sure how it's irrelevant. Animal strike, which we've talked about, we saw that on the ATSB's website. Another one that's redacted, another one, there's quite a few of the redactions here. Weather hazardous conditions, aerodrome, foreign object, damage, debris, loose objects on the maneuvering area of an aerodrome causing or having the potential to cause damage to an aircraft. Again, a lot of stuff that's redacted, and I'm not too sure why. So part of me is thinking I should maybe appeal this. Miscellaneous, this is where maybe UAP would live. Other safety related. All other circumstances not defined as an occurrence type in which the safety of an aircraft or the integrity of the air traffic service system may have been jeopardized. Other non-safety related. All other circumstances not defined as an occurrence type that the reporter believes should be reported to Air Services Management. So if I was a pilot, why would I, if I identify or observe a UAP or UFO, in the vicinity of my aircraft in Australian airspace? Well, one, there's nothing in here that acknowledges or defines UAP when we know that there is a clear definition of UAP in the United States, but it's not formally recognized in Australia. And we know that there is a long-held stigma that is associated with this topic. And the US has gone through this. Everything that the US Department of Defense and now the FAA are doing is actually making it easier and more comfortable for aviators and pilots to come forward and report. In fact, they have to report. It's mandatory. If you're a pilot, if you're in the US Department of Defense and you observe UAP, certainly if you're an aviator or a pilot, you have to report it. You don't just, oh no, UAP, UFO, I'm not going to say anything. You are obligated, you're mandated to report it. Australia is so far behind the 8 ball, and it just makes absolutely no sense that Australia's head is still buried in the sand on this topic, and it's so incredibly frustrating. Let's have a look at another document. We just looked at the ATS occurrence definitions via Airservices Australia. Well, let's have a look at this next document. I can find it here. Where is it? There it is. Now, this is a while back. The reason why I show you this historical FOIA request is nothing has really changed in 3 years. This was in October of 2022. I submitted a request to Airservices Australia asking for all emails and supporting file attachments sent to, from, or cross-copied to Airservices Australia staff for 1st of April 2022 to the 6th of April 2022. So I looked at a 6-month date range, and I think it was just a random date selection that contain a match for any of the following specific keywords. Each should be taken as unique keyword in its entirety: UAP, UFO, unusual aerial sighting, unauthorized aircraft movement. On the 10th of October 2022, I, who was the authorized decision maker here, inform you that you are liable to pay the amount of $120 to process the above FOIA request. Well, it was a little bit steep and I wasn't prepared to pay that. So quite nicely, they came back and said Airservices Australia does not have nor has considered developing an investigatory function with respect to UFOs. We understand that the Department of Defense had responsibility for such a function, but this ceased some time ago, which it did in 1996. Prior to the submission of this request, the applicant advised that they were interested in in Airservices' current policies and guidance on responding to encounters of unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, historically referred to as unidentified flying objects. Airservices advised that they did not have any, but that the Department of Defense or CASA may hold relevant documentation. Well, certainly I haven't been able to find anything from CASA. And basically they didn't have to do this, but they went kind of above and beyond and gave me kind of like an overview of what would be included in the documents that they had located that they wanted to charge me $120 for. Correspondence between staff regarding UFO videos on YouTube and other online UFO articles, informal discussions about alleged UFO sightings, including 2 items of air traffic controller audio, a report relaying, not necessarily, well, that's interesting though. Was that Australian air traffic controller audio? A report relaying concerns from the public that the number for the Australian UFO Research Network is not working. Automatically generated notification from Twitter that discusses a sighting of a B-2 bomber. Marketing, emails, correspondence between myself, the authorized FOI officer, and other officers within Airservices seeking information on whether Airservices has any policies or procedures to deal with. There's a follow-up FOIA request opportunity for me there to find up what exactly those requests look like in terms of seeking information. So that's basically, you can see that nothing has changed in 3 years. That was 2022. We're now in 2025. Nothing's moved the needle for Airservices Australia. Nothing's moved the needle for CASA. Nothing's moved the needle for Australian Transport Safety Bureau. Nothing's changed the needle for the Defence Aviation Safety Authority, DASA. Nothing's moved the needle for the Australian Department of Defence. Why? Why is Australia so reluctant to take this topic seriously? I just don't understand it. This was a document that I got back only today. This was a FOIA request that I had submitted on the 17th of November. What's that? That's less than 10 days ago. I requested copies of air traffic services safety occurrence reports created within, stored within, or processed through the CIRRUS system or any preceding comparable historical safety reporting mechanism that relate to all of these terms. Unidentified objects, unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, unidentified flying objects, unusual aerial sightings, any similar or equivalent terminology, reports where controllers, pilots, or other personnel reported an aerial object activity or phenomenon that could not be identified or classified, reports that include narrative or coded occurrence data, including abnormal, unexpected, anomalous, or unexplained aerial observations. This includes ATS safety occurrence reports, safety reports logged by controllers, pilots, aerodrome personnel, or aircraft or services staff, safety occurrence entries produced under the safety management system framework, including those produced under code or its earlier versions, any internal documentation that corresponds to these occurrences. The date range for the request, 31st of December 2015 to 14 November 2025. So a 10-year period, basically. Please note, I'm not seeking routine meteorological reports unless they include an unidentified aerial object phenomena component. Reports clearly attributable to balloons, drones, aircraft, or other known sources, unless the report initially categorized the observation as unidentified or abnormal. So what was the response? I identified no documents as falling in the scope of the request. So no. Again, I was going through occurrence reports, no occurrence reports in a 10-year period that conform to any of these search terms. Searches were conducted across agency systems and repositories, including Airservices document management systems, Orbit Content Manager, and CIRRUS Safety Reporting System. Keywords used include UFO, UAP, unidentified, and abnormal. Now, that is not exhaustive because I used a whole slew of other terms here. So they've kind of picked and choose what they wanted to, UFO, UAP, unidentified. But again, nothing So if one of two things is happening, Australian pilots aren't seeing anything in Australian airspace, and so there's nothing to report, or they are seeing something in Australian airspace and they're not reporting it out of fear of stigma, or they are reporting it, but they're not using these terms. Now, I don't know which one it is, but again, it makes sense to me based on what we have heard from the likes of Ross Coulthart, where he's saying, well, in a defense context, he sat down with an F-35 pilot who said that, you know, they're seeing anomalous objects in Australian airspace behind the wheel of an F-35, and they're not reporting it out of fear of having a black dot placed against their name, and the fact that they're getting a clear message from the current Chief of Air Force that the topic is not being taken seriously. And we've seen that just through the comments of Minister for Foreign Affairs, Penny Wong. Is this a UFO question? Like, you're just taking the piss, not taking it seriously. And it's just so frustrating that it's so great to see that you have advocates for UAP and safety of flight by way of Ryan Graves, but there is no one, unfortunately, championing or advocating for UAP in a safety of flight context in Australia. And it makes sense to me, going back to the question that was asked in that Reddit AMA, that Americans for Safe Aerospace are receiving reports from Australians. Now, we don't know what the details of those reports are, but it makes sense that if there is no reporting mechanism in Australia, there's a stigma that exists, and there's no formal acknowledgement of the terminology UFO, UAP by CASA, ATSB, Airservices Australia, Australian Department of Defence, DASA. Why would someone want to report something using those terms if it's not something that is currently adopted? So you can just see, hopefully this has shown you, and I'm kind of ranting with a lot of my thoughts as we go through this, but you can just see how far behind the 8 ball Australia really is when it comes to reporting protocols and mechanisms pertaining to UAP when we're talking about safety of flight. Forget about national security implications. Even just from a safety of flight perspective, there is no consideration for UAP or recognition of UAP, and in my opinion, that's a concern. So this is exactly why I support the mission of Americans for Safe Aerospace, and I really respect and admire Ryan Graves' advocacy to improve safety of flight pertaining to UAP. So that's my rant over, folks. Hopefully that's been of interest. Before we segue into our next topic, because again, I do want to get under the 3 hours, let's just have a look at one final article, actually, before we exit the topic of safety of flight in an Australian context. I do want to show you this follow-up article from Americans for Safe Aerospace, which actually came out today. So it's incredibly relevant. Published, today, 25th in the US, by Ryan Graves. Why global aviation needs a common framework for UAP reporting. I think this sums up quite nicely what we've talked about. At the Seoul Symposium in Italy, typo there, in Italy this fall, something became very clear. Pilots around the world are reporting the same phenomenon, but every country is handling it differently. Well, Australia's not handling it at all. From Scandinavia to South America, from North America to the Pacific Rim, aviation professionals describe objects whose behavior does not match known aircraft, drones, or natural phenomena. These are trained pilots and air traffic controllers whose judgment we trust with millions of lives every day. There is no international standard for how to report these observations, no common terminology, no coordinated effort to understand what is happening in our shared airspace, and no centralized reporting database. A safety issue without borders. The lack of coordination is a safety risk. Modern airspace is increasingly complex. Drones, and we know all too about drones recently, balloons, hypersonic systems, and autonomous aircraft now share the sky with commercial and military traffic. In that environment, an unidentified object is not simply a mystery. It is a potential hazard. And I've been yelling that to the skies time and time again on this channel for the last few years. And then unexplained near miss can go unreported because no clear channel exists to document it. And we've talked about this in an Australian context. Objects appearing near airports, flight corridors, or sensitive installations raise both safety and security concerns. When pilots in different countries encounter similar phenomena but report them through disconnected national systems, the aviation community cannot identify patterns, assess risks, or develop appropriate responses. What should be a global safety concern remains fragmented across dozens of bureaucracies working in isolation. The cost of working alone. Every nation that has studied this issue has learned valuable lessons. France's long-standing scientific approach, Chile's commitment to transparency, Japan's emerging pilot protocols, Japan, ally of Australia, and Canada, another ally. Canada's analytical work have each contributed important insights. These efforts have largely proceeded independently without shared standards or coordinated analysis. The result is inefficiency and missed opportunity. Countries duplicate work, repeat mistakes, and fail to benefit from lessons already learned elsewhere. More importantly, the absence of a common framework means aviation safety decisions are being made with incomplete information. What a global standard would accomplish. A coordinated international approach to UAP reporting would provide three essential elements currently missing from global aviation safety. A shared vocabulary. Pilots need consistent terminology to describe what they observe, regardless of which country they are flying over or which language they speak. A standardized reporting process. Aviation professionals should have a clear, confidential channel for documenting unusual observations with protections against stigma or retaliation. A framework for reducing misidentification. Distinguishing between known systems and genuinely anonymous phenomena matters for both aviation safety and national security, particularly when objects appear near sensitive sites or critical infrastructure. These are practical tools that would make global aviation measurably safer. The American Safe Aerospace role as a standard setter. Americans for Safe Aerospace is positioned to take the first step in developing these standards. And I agree. They've put their hand up and said, "We're going to lead the charge, guys. You can follow us, or you can get on board, or you can do nothing." As a pilot-led organization, which is important, ASA carries credibility that no government agency can replicate. Pilots trust other pilots. Unlike state agencies, ASA is not constrained by classification requirements, political cycles, or diplomatic sensitivities. We can speak plainly about what the data shows and what aviation safety requires. Our goal is not to impose an American framework on the rest of the world. And that's good that they've said that, is to create a foundation that any nation can adopt, adapt, or build upon. We lead by providing structure, not by claiming unique authority. The standards that will emerge be strengthened by the contributions of aviation professionals and researchers from every region. I mean, if you look at, commercial airline and commercial flight, standard operating procedures, it's consistent from one country to the next in a lot of respects in terms of, flight operations, how you have to communicate with air traffic control. Why is it such a stretch to have a standardized approach to UAP reporting? Someone must begin the work. The International Civil Aviation Organization, the body responsible for setting worldwide aviation norms, has remained silent on this issue. Why? If the international system will not act, it fails to those willing to step forward. Moving forward together, ASA is moving forward with the development of global UAP reporting standards and collection systems. We are building the infrastructure to gather, analyze, and act on data from aviation professionals worldwide. Our goal is to create a network that brings reports from multiple countries into a centralized system where patterns can be identified and actionable safety insights can be developed. Beyond data collection, we are establishing a collaborative research environment where aviation organizations, scientific bodies, and government agencies can work together on shared questions. This means pooling resources, comparing methodologies, and building on one another's findings rather than duplicating efforts in isolation. If you are part of an aviation safety organization, pilot group, scientific body, or government agency working on this issue, we invite you to connect your efforts with ours. Share your data, contribute your reports to our system, participate in our research collaborations. Help us build a comprehensive picture of what is happening in global airspace. ASA has also developed effective approaches to advocacy, legislation, and policy change that other organizations can learn from. Our work with the Safe Airspace for Americans Act, our collaboration with regulators like the FAA, provide a tested model for how to move this issue forward within existing frameworks. We're not wanting for perfect international consensus. We're not waiting for perfect international consensus. We are building the standards now, and we invite the global aviation community to join us in making them stronger. The network and research environment we create today will become the foundation for safer skies tomorrow. If you have data to share, want to connect your reporting system with ours, or interest in collaborative research, contact us at reports@safeaerospace.org. Bravo, Americans for Safe Aerospace. I applaud you and commend your efforts leading the charge on advocating for standardized reporting protocols across the international aviation community. And you can just see, I think Ryan Graves' article there just sums up perfectly how disparate and fragmented everything is from country to country. Australia and the US, look how different. Look at the vast differences and contrast. We're doing sweet F all. At least America is making a concerted effort to doing something. A little bit harder at the FAA level, but at least we know the US Department of Defense, they have now mandatory reporting procedures in place. And as a result, that has reduced stigma. People will talk about it and submit reports freely, not fearing any reprisals. So I know I haven't done a deep dive on UAP in Australian civil aviation context. I thought it was important to do that because I always am talking about the Australian Department of Defence's engagement, or rather lack thereof, on the topic. And now you can see the uphill battle that we have at a civil on the civil side as well. So let's have a look at some of your comments, folks, because I've been ranting for a long time there. So let's just have a look. Want to come to some of your thoughts as we went through. Let's see. Okay, so we've got just a comment from Telekinetic from earlier on. The ridicule has been difficult to deal with from my siblings. It took a lot of energy to respectfully explain the importance and acknowledgement and respectful discussion independent of viewpoint. Yeah, so, it's sometimes they're not comfortable conversations to have with family members, friends, colleagues about UAP when you don't know what their reaction or response is going to be. But I've actually been quietly surprised when I've brought up the topic or conversation of UAP, just how willing people are to talk about it and engage you without, looking at you as if you're wearing the tinfoil hat. I've used the example of before where I was traveling from Melbourne to Sydney to visit family, and I was doing some research on the Phoenix Lights incident a couple of years back, specifically to Kurt Russell's encounter with the Phoenix Lights. And the safety inspector, when you go through, the baggage area, baggage handling, the X-ray screens and stuff, my bag got pulled aside, and he's going through it, and he pulls out the book. And before we know it, we were then in between him dealing with other customers. We were having a 5-10 minute conversation about UFOs, UAP, and the Phoenix Lights. Completely unexpected, completely random, and it was just a very matter of fact, no nonsense conversation. US is taking this seriously. There's certainly something going on with the topic, and just someone that was very curious about the topic. So you'd be surprised how many people would be willing to engage with you and have a adult conversation on the topic, and not automatically, throw you in the crazy pool and see you with a tinfoil hat. At least that's been my experience anyway. 82 Paul Mac, many thanks for your support. Hollywood, great to see you, my friend. Hope you are keeping well. Thanks for tuning in on X. Telekinetic, interested how big was the UAV seen near Suncorp Stadium? It would be good to get some more information on that case. And again, that was only one that I've looked at a very, very superficial level. But it's a good point. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that username, but username, read it for yourself. Oz government and America government will never tell us the truth. We all know already they cannot take that from us. Well, there's certainly a lot of questions that remain unanswered on the UAP UFO topic, particularly as to the what's behind UAP, what's their intent, where are they from. But we certainly know that UAP is real. There is a there well and truly to it, and that's where I'm at on the topic. Excellent examples, near collision air safety incidents. Grant, it's a valid piece in forming the greater point of the need for increased awareness. Mark Shed talk, Grant, they wouldn't report it because it would impact their jobs. Yep. Fear of reprisals, stigma, get the black dot against your name, jeopardize future employment opportunities. I think that is a very, very true statement that we've heard echoed time and time again from the United States. Bex, good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. You got a bit of fear of missing out. You're here now, so you can enjoy the ride. Let's have a look at some of the comments. The amount of documents that won't be clocked as UFO UAP due to the wordings. The terminology, Ryan Graves made a good point there, that there needs to be a standardization of terminology, particularly from a civilian reporting standpoint. And it's clear that there isn't. Aussie was, the issue gets even less coverage in Australia, maybe I presume you're saying that, than the US. That is true. Australia is really only doing still copy and paste job. Whenever there is something significant to report on, they'll cover it, but it's nothing new. They won't. Like, I'll give you an example. To news.com.au's credit, I have to thank Frank Chung for he's kind of put his head above the parapet. He's done a lot of reporting on the UAP topic, not just in an Australian context, but reporting on what's happening in the US. But recently, news.com.au did put out an article on the age of disclosure, but it was very much copy and paste. There's no, the investigative journalism is kind of doesn't exist in Australia. I mean, you got there's an opportunity for, and I've said this time and time again, like the morning breakfast shows that do report the news. They have serious conversations with people in people that are in elected in positions of authority and power, the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles, but they don't ask questions about the UAP topic. They'll ask questions when, thankfully, they had me on to talk about the Today Show, invited me to come on and talk about the Westall petition, and I thought that was a very positive conversation. But if you have Sunrise with Nat and what's his name, the other dude, there's just still the air of stigma. They're just covering the topic for the sake of covering the topic because it's newsworthy that's coming out of the United States. They've never asked the question, well, why isn't Australia doing anything about the US topic? The only individual that I've heard ask that question is David. I can't remember his last name. The gentleman that I was on with, Sarah Arbo. He asked me the question, well, why is Australia not taking this topic seriously? I'm paraphrasing, but there aren't those sort of questions from the Australian news media. Only those that have covered the topic that I've talked about time and time again. Jamison Murphy, the great reporting that he's done for the Canberra Times. Frank Chung has done some good reporting as well, but other reporting is really much just copy and paste journalism. They don't ask questions about this topic in an Australian context, and that's frustrating. I tell you, maybe the guys at Pine Gap don't let Australia has a proper UAP reporting process. So maybe Australia just lacks the maturity to widen its aperture. Yeah, I think we're caught in the 70s. We're just so far behind. Australia needs its own age of disclosure documentary. I wonder what that would look like. That'd be an interesting one. Short order cook, Grant, what role do you think Australia will have if we ever get disclosure? Methinks zip. Yeah, it's a good question. I wonder if there was a black swan event, or there was this, the president POTUS stands at the podium and makes an announcement, what would the Australian government's response to that be? And I don't know the answer. It'd be interesting to know how they respond. Do they just fall into line and follow suit and, oh yeah, we now we need to start taking this topic seriously? Or do they just kind of keep their heads buried in the sand saying, oh, well, we haven't yet seen any scientific or other compelling evidence to devote resources to the ongoing investigation of this topic, even though our Five Eyes partner and closest allies said that UAP are not only real, but NHI is real. Now that's just kind of thinking way down the road. I mean, this all leads into the age of disclosure, which is what we're going to get into now. Aussie was a FOIA request is like asking a criminal if they have any information that would incriminate. I don't entirely agree. I think FOIA is a valuable tool to have in your toolbox. It doesn't give you all the answers, but it certainly can give you breadcrumbs that can lead to other breadcrumbs from a larger loaf of bread. I mean, look at all the information we know about, this topic as a result of FOIA requests from John Greenwald. Some of the FOIA requests that I've done, some of the FOIA requests that others have done. That's information that we would not have known publicly before if it wasn't for FOIA. Now, again, FOIA is never going to be, nor has it ever been, the be-all, end-all. But I think it's certainly an important tool that can give us valuable insights and breadcrumbs. Bex, the last thing the US should do is give power to people who already have power and have access to other rich people. Ordinary US sovereignty who are independent have no bias in the UAP issue. They're less likely to be corrupted. I love your mind, Bex. You always come at it with a deep psychological approach. I dig your mind, my friend. Shorter to cook, is there a report mechanism for Antarctica, or would any reports go back to nations that's a good question about it, Antarctica, because there is, it says, I don't know what the answer would be about Antarctica, because it's kind of, no one has claim over Antarctica. There are, I think, I honestly don't know how that works for Antarctica. Who has sovereignty? Is it divided again amongst a number of nations? It's a good question. I'm thinking that all this data of UAP, UFO activity in the airspace across the world is already available by satellite. Reports would just verify ASA data that the UFO, UAP was sighted physically. Let's have a look at some of the other questions. Yep. Copy and paste journalism is the norm. Sadly, it is these days. I don't disagree with you there. Harry Bridges, given the drone problems around airports, you're right. There needs to be better data collection in Australia. Yep. Teleco, good question. If POTUS made a disclosure statement, what would Australia do? Surely where they kick Australian air safety into a compliance-based procedure. You would hope so. You would want to hope so. But you see some of the reporting in the press at the moment, TMZ, and don't take what they put out there with a grain of salt. Although sometimes you get some good celebrity goss, but they're saying President Trump best positioned to disclose that NHI is a reality. But so let's use that as a segue to jump into the age of disclosure. Zodiac Gang signs. I still remember Kyle and Jackie having a random segment on their show to share the Pentagon's words regarding recent UAP activity. They were mocking it, but it really shows our media is controlled. Yeah, I don't give a shit. They still, that stigma that sits like a bad smell above the topic, that black cloud. Well, let's jump into, because I'm mindful of everyone's time. So let's have a look at Bill Chalker. Love talking about Bill. He was invited for the second time on Podcast UFO with Martin Willis. First interview, Bill had some wild storms up in New South Wales, so it wasn't the best audio connection, but he recently was on again with Martin Willis. And I've linked the interview in the show notes below so you can have a look at it. But do want to play for you a couple of clips, 2 clips from that show. It was just always good. I always enjoy hearing from Bill his perspectives, not just on cases, but in general about research, how people should be doing their due diligence. There's data there if people are bothered to look for it. Bill's been at this for, almost 60 years, and someone that I greatly respect. So this is Bill's comments with Martin Willis recently on podcast UFO. And I'll set this up for you, basically talking about, there being really a lack of awareness on the UAP topic from a historical perspective.
More enlightened these days, but still there's always that misunderstanding that comes from a lack of awareness of what's being examined, what's being researched. And it can be easily remedied by doing a degree of proper research, being aware of their own files, that kind of stuff. And that's what I keep reminding various government people that I interact with. Have a look at your own files, for God's sake. Review them. There's plenty of evidence there. And they keep saying, well, they've examined the subject, there's nothing, just any scientific merit, and yet their own scientists, their own pilots, their own defence officials have had their own sightings, and yet there's no kind of modern awareness. People seem to have a very short-term memory when it comes to the UFO subject, and yet it's all there. It's a very enduring phenomenon, and plenty of documentation.
Yeah, some points there in Australian context. Obviously, Harry Turner. You have Australian politicians historically that have had it. I think RJ Casey, Foreign Affairs Minister, I think he was back in the day. You had Harold Holt, had a letter written to him from a good mate of his about the Tully Nest incident. So there are a number of politicians that are known to have had an interest in the topic, and there are probably quite a number out there that are unknown. I think Ross has spoken to someone that was fairly high up in maybe a cabinet position that had a sighting of a UAP. So and Bill did a lot of work appraising the Air Force's Royal Australian Air Force's files on UFOs. They didn't know what they had, and Bill went in there and basically did an appraisal. The Air Force director, I think it was, or Daffy, the director of the Air Force Intelligence, and you went in there and got some golden nuggets that were sitting in the Air Force's UFO files, and they really didn't even know what they had. So this next clip is a good one. Pays respect to the great work that Reese Dalton Morgan is doing over at his podcast UFO Aussie. He's obviously doing some great things with the Unhidden group. This is Bill talking about the next generation of UAP researchers. As some of the veterans of the space, Bill and Keith, they've still got plenty of years ahead of them, but they've been at this for a very long time. And there is now, hopefully going to be an increasing number of younger folks, the younger generation, that start to ask questions and take this topic seriously. So this is Bill talking about the next generation of UAP researchers.
Another, like to say, eventually we're all going to get replaced. Is there another Bill Chalker coming up? I mean, are there any young people really involved in researching?
Yeah, I'm not quite past my use by date yet, Martin, but I'm still actively interested in doing investigations. But there are a lot of up and coming active investigators. There was Reese Dalton Morgan, that kind of thing. There's a lot of newer researchers coming into the scene, so I'm trying to actively support these researchers and do a lot of mentoring and that kind of stuff and sharing of information. So it's great to see that there is no shortage of people that are taking the time to look at the totality of the UFO history, but also look at the modern day phenomenon as well, and trying to do what I keep emphasising, the deep dive into the subject. And that means to really get into the subject and do the kind of hard work that's required. A lot of the times there's so much, I guess, armchair pontification that goes on where it's pretty clear when you listen to some of these people that they haven't done any research. It's just subjective kind of responses, and you're kind of thinking they're getting more attention. It's just ridiculous. And again, I think people should, think about things critically, like have a listen to the credentials of the people that are making various statements and take the time to carefully consider what these people are saying, what credibility they have, what kind of background, what kind of research they've done, and then draw conclusions, not a knee-jerk reaction. Yep.
Some sage advice there from Bill, and it was funny. Bill and Reese and I had a chance to sit down with Bill for lunch in Sydney. When was it? A month or two back. And I'll be the first to admit, and Bill and I have had a laugh about this once or twice, that my knowledge pre-1996 on the UAP topic in an Australian context is pretty piss weak. I was saying, we really need to book Bill for a 2-day workshop so he can give us a comprehensive historical breakdown of UAP in an Australian context historically, because there is so much information that's available, not just in Bill's head and Bill's work and Keith's work and Keith's head, but the National Archives of Australia. There's just so many fascinating documents that reveal how seriously the UAP UFO topic, maybe not how seriously it was being taken, but how much of a concerted effort there was to allow for reporting, recording, investigations. There are a lot of nuggets in the National Archives, and that's why I say Australia has such a long history of investigating the UAP, or unusual aerial sightings that the defense called it. You're really from the years after Roswell, the 50s, all the way through to the early 1990s. So Bill makes a good point there that there is, you really just can't go off everything that's happened post 2004, the Nimitz incident, or post 2017 with the New York Times. There's such rich data and history in the historical reports. And I know Jimmy loves going through the National Archives reports, but that's an area that I haven't sunk my teeth into yet. I've really just focused on everything post 1996. So that's an area where, I'm still very green on the topic. And I think there's always a chance there's no one expert on the UFO UAP topic. I think there's always an opportunity to learn, as far back as this topic goes. I mean, we'd talk about 80 years, but the topic goes a lot further back than 80 years. If you listen to a lot of the different cultures around the world that talk about seeing things in their sky and then drawing it in their cave art and Dreamtime stories handed down from generation to generation in the Indigenous population in Australia. So Bill makes a good point there, and I always enjoy listening and hearing what Bill has to say, because he's been at this for so long. I would say one of the world's most established and greatest assets to the UFO UAP research community. He and Keith and others have been at this for a very long time, and have a massive body of work that thankfully is being preserved. There are efforts to preserve a lot of their research. So let's move away from Bill's interview. You can look at it if you're interested in the link to that episode in the show notes. So let's now get into the age of disclosure. So I had the opportunity to watch this the day after it came out. I think we had it on last Friday evening. I saw it on Saturday night. And I wanted to share my thoughts with you, and for you to share your thoughts as well. Obviously, I'm not going to play any clips from the age of disclosure. I'm respectful of the content being copyrighted, and I want to encourage you to actually see it, whether that's now and you pay the asking price. I think it's $38.50 if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, or if you wait a little down the road, I'm sure it'll be available on Amazon Prime when it's not a premiere release. So we'll talk about the sticker shock that a lot of people had as we go through. So first and foremost, Shorter to Cook, very much appreciated, my friend. You didn't need to send through a super sticker, but I greatly appreciate your support. Thank you for your generosity. It is greatly appreciated. So we'll come back to some of your comments towards the end, but I want to get into the age of disclosure. Now, I actually agree with some of the reviews that have been posted on social media. I do believe that this is a quote from The Guardian: the most serious and sourced documentary in their government's handling of UAP information to date. Could not agree more. Absolutely, 100%. Incredibly comprehensive, incredibly well done, well produced. I think it is the best documentary on the UAP subject to date, hands down. People Magazine, or People, the first-time director, pretty much nailed it. Would totally agree. Dan Farah, kudos, job well done. Wonderful job as a first-time director to get your head around such a comprehensive and deep dive ridden topic. Fox News, an incredibly eye-opening documentary. Definitely for folks that are not well-versed in this subject matter or have not been exposed to it significantly over the years since 2017. Definitely an eye-opening documentary. So I actually enjoyed it. Obviously, there were no real new revelations for me. I was managing my expectations going in. I wasn't expecting really to learn anything new significantly. There were certainly some breadcrumbs in there that I found incredibly interesting, which I'll mention. But overall, as a documentary that was not intended for me and for those of us that take this topic seriously, for the still largely uninformed general public, I think it is an incredibly comprehensive and well-produced documentary that they can look at and see and say, wow, this is a topic that is being taken seriously. And then it goes into a whole new area talking about the NHI, which, I'm still at very much the stage that UAP are real. We know that there is real anomalous objects being sighted in not just US airspace, but in other countries of the world and in Australia as well, from a historical perspective and present day. But this kind of wraps up everything that we have heard. The age of disclosure wraps nicely in a very comprehensive bow, everything that has really happened since the New York Times broke its bombshell story in 2017. And obviously, we can talk about that as we go through. But some of my thoughts, and happy for you guys to share yours. Again, this was not intended for us. This was not for the UFO community. This was still for a largely uninformed general public. And I think, again, first-time director Dan Farah did a wonderful job. That said, I do have some lingering questions. I wouldn't call them, or maybe criticisms, but things that I thought, well, that was interesting choice that was not included in the documentary. So question that I have was, why was there no formal acknowledgement of AAWSAP, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program? Considering, when you consider that Jay Stratton, Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis, all members of AAWSAP were in the age of disclosure. There was no acknowledgement of AAWSAP at all, above and beyond just a very short passing comment that Jay Stratton made shortly after his introduction. The $22 million contract that was awarded to AAWSAP, which was nicknamed ATIP. Well, it wasn't awarded to ATIP that Lou Elizondo talks about and Jay Stratton talk about in the film. That $22 million that was secured through Senate Majority Leader Senator Harry Reid, that went to AAWSAP. It didn't go to ATIP. And this is something that stood out for me. So Jay Stratton, a quote verbatim from him in The Age of Disclosure. He said, and this is a quote verbatim from Jay Stratton, "It was at the DIA that my colleagues and I started getting reports of what are now called UAP. We went all over the government, the Pentagon, every intel agency, anywhere we could think to try and find the UAP program, assuming there was one. As far as we could tell, no one in the United States government had a UAP program. So my colleagues and I began a new program, ORSAP." He didn't say ORSAP. He just said, "So my colleagues and I began a new program, which ultimately became ATIP." So there's kind of a kernel of truth there to what he's saying. But again, there's no formal recognition and acknowledgement of ORSAP. Then it jumps, after that clip, it jumps to Lou Elizondo, who's saying, after Jay says, which ultimately came ATIP, Lou says the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP. Comes back to Jay Stratton. He says the funding for this effort was sponsored by then Senate Majority Leader Senator Harry Reid. Now, that's not accurate. Now, it could have been the way that Jay may not have said that in the way that we're saying it's not accurate. It may have just been edited that way. But that is not the way they've presented that is not accurate, because we know that the New York Times, Ralph Blumenthal, Leslie Kane, and I can't remember the other journalist's name, they reported that the $22 million was for the program ATIP, which it was not. It was for ORSAP. And we've heard George Knapp talk about this time again with James Lakatsky, Colm Kelleher, authors of Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. We know that the $22 million contract was awarded to ORSAP, not to Lou Elizondo's ATIP effort, which came in the years after ORSAP. So, and then all you have to do is basically, leading on from Jay Stratton's comments in The Age of Disclosure, just read from Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. This is on page, this is the forward from Senator Harry Reid on page, 17, or in the forward. It says the December 2017 story has done a tremendous amount of good, including prompting the US Navy to create a formal system for pilots to report UAP sightings, shattering years of stigma and denial. But unfortunately, it has also muddied the waters. The article correctly identified that the $22 million Senators Stevens and Inouye and I secured went to Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, BASS, but it left the government's ORSAP program completely out of the narrative. The story merged the original ORSAP program with the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP, a program that also investigated UAPs, but in the context of the US military. And that's what Lou has said time and time again about his leadership role for ATIP. Senator Harry Reid goes on to say, regardless of when ORSAP ended or when ATIP began, the facts are undeniable. Data on UAPs exists. They need to be analyzed. More data needs to be collected, and the public should be informed as much as possible. And so then later in the Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, now don't know if this is written by George Knapp, Colm Kelleher, or if it's from James Lakatsky, but it's chapter 18, post-ORSAP events, page 156. It reads, the story, being the New York Times story, included interviews with Senator Harry Reid, who had secured the $22 million in funding for the DIA supervised private contract, and with Robert Bigelow, whose subsidiary company BASS landed the contract and conducted the study under the overall acronym of ORSAP. The New York Times story never mentioned ORSAP. Rather, it mistakenly reported that the budget went to ATIP. It goes on to say in a later paragraph, the Times story generated a tidal wave of interest among other news organizations. So that's, in my opinion, that's what the Age of Disclosure is. It's the New York Times on steroids. Again, incredibly comprehensive, well-produced. Now, the fact that it doesn't recognize and acknowledge ORSAP, does that take away from what they're presenting in the documentary? I don't think it does, but it's just an interesting choice that they made to leave out acknowledgement of ORSAP. And so my question is, why? Was it a strategic decision? Was it a very specific strategic decision to omit ORSAP because of the baggage that historically comes with ORSAP? That it was not just about investigating or doing these DIRDs, these defense intelligence research, what were they? Research, papers, but it was also about researching UAP and related phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch. Paranormal aspects of it, database, consciousness. Why did they leave ORSAP out of the age of disclosure when it was ORSAP that then became ATIP? And that would be a question that I would love to, I'd be very interested to get an answer on. Again, doesn't take away from what was presented in the documentary, but it's just interesting that it was omitted from, it's like ORSAP was erased from the histories, basically. And let me just go on to show you, this is from James Lekatsky himself. In 2021, he did an interview with George Knapp on Coast to Coast. Let's see if I can pull this up for you. Where is it? Here we go. So this is a UFO Joe Mugger does some great transcript work, and he transcribed this. This was an article that was done on the 14th of October 2021, Coast to Coast AM. Let me just zoom on in so it's a little easier on the eyes there. Get rid of this. Oops. Okay, so let's come on down to. So George Knapp asks James Lekatsky in 2021, and how many different programs were going on at the time? I mean, we had yours, the Advanced Aerospace Weapon Systems application, and then the ATIP was going on with Luis Elizondo. James Lekatsky, well, that's not, ATIP followed. The ATIP name was created for a letter that Senator Reid sent in trying to establish a SAP, Special Access Program, for our program for various reasons. And Lou used that name when he, and I guess it had to be in the time frame of 2012, perhaps that he started looking exclusively at military investigations, and he used the name ATIP. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's fine. But there was a difference between the two programs. Ours had $22 million in funding. His had zero. Ours looked at military and civilian investigations. His looked at military exclusively. And we had, of course, contractor and subcontractor support. He had no contractor support. Now, this is all according to James Lekatsky, but he did his thing, we did ours. But I can say that in direct answer to your question, we were the only game in town. I would say from 2008 to 2012. So again, why was ORSAP not formally acknowledged or recognized in the age of disclosure? I would just love to get an answer on that. And that leads me into my next point. That being said, why was James Lekatsky not featured in the age of disclosure? He was the principal for ORSAP. And the age of disclosure features 34 former and present US government officials, many of whom claim that the United States has been securely working to capture UFOs since 1947. Well, look what we've heard from James Lekatsky, that he's gone so far to claim that the US government has a UFO in its possession and it breached the hull. So based on that alone, wouldn't you want to include James Lekatsky's commentary and testimony in such a significant documentary as The Age of Disclosure? I think you would. Maybe he was invited to participate and he declined. If so, why did he decline? Why would you only want to have your testimony documented in the books you're authoring and shown in reporting exclusively by George Knapp, and on the Weaponized podcast with George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell? Wouldn't you want to tell your story far and wide to a much wider audience via something so significant, potentially in terms of reach as The Age of Disclosure? I think you would. So was James Lekatsky invited? If he was, why didn't he participate? If he wasn't invited, why wasn't he invited? Again, ORSAT was completely left off the map altogether. My next question that I had, well, where was David Grush? He's been integral in the UAP UFO disclosure movement since his congressional testimony in July 2023. So it would make sense that he be featured in the film beyond just the archival footage that they used of him testifying before Congress and obviously interviews that he had done in the news media. Why would you not have David Grush featured in the documentary to provide additional context and commentary? He's gone on Rogan. He did an interview with Brett Baer for Fox News that came out only last week. It would make sense, again, to include someone like David Grush. Now, was he invited and he didn't accept an invitation? If so, why did he decline an invitation? If he wasn't invited, why wasn't he invited? Again, it makes sense to me that you would want to have someone like David Grush included in your documentary, considering his significance in this whole story. Where again, you're getting claims that the claims of this being non-human intelligence, NHI, is all classified. Now, if so, that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of us, because it's basically, we have to take the word of these 34 current and former government officials again. And to Bill Chalker's point, you got to look at the credentials of the people that are making these claims as well. These are incredibly intelligent folks, well credentialed, impeccable service records, long service to their country. Are they all being disingenuous and lying, or completely credulous in believing what they have heard or they've been told? I have no idea. But again, if you take Bill's comments into consideration, well, you kind of have to look at the fact that who you're hearing from. You're hearing from some folks that are incredibly intelligent, do have impeccable service credentials and a record. But for us, we want the evidence, and we can't see the evidence for non-human intelligence because it's all apparently classified. And again, I think that's a hard pill to swallow, certainly for me, because I haven't seen any evidence. I've seen evidence that there's UAP. It's congressionally mandated that the US investigate the nature and extent of UAP via its current investigatory body, ARO. We know that it's a topic that's being taken incredibly serious by the US Department of Defense, so much so that they have mandatory reporting procedures. It's not just the military that's seeing UAP, though. You've got everyday folks, pilots, police officers. You've got folks that are trained observers. You've got people that are incredibly intelligent people that want to devote their careers to protecting their communities, their country. So, I don't think you can just put, they're all just credulous, crazy folks. You can't put that hat on everyone and paint a broad brushstroke. But one does have to ask, well, what evidence is there to support the claims that are being presented? UAP is a much easier pill to swallow than, I think, for me personally, NHI being the what's responsible for UAP, only because I haven't seen any evidence of it. I haven't had my own experience. I haven't seen any evidence that confirms and concludes without a shadow of a doubt that it is UAP. Could it be a foreign adversarial system? Certainly. Is NHI a possibility? Absolutely it is. But I can't say it is because I haven't seen any evidence. And that evidence is all classified according to these former and current government officials. The other comment I'll make, Eric Davis. Eric Davis made a claim in the Age of Documentary that a source in the Legacy program told him that the Legacy program was aware of 2 species of NHI and that the NHI had been in contact with the Legacy program. Now, what do you do with that? I mean, again, I haven't seen any evidence of that claim, so I just have to kind of note it, say that's incredibly interesting. It'd be great to see some evidence that can support that claim. Now, Eric Davis, incredibly intelligent individual, been working in his field for God knows how long. However, I do have some concerns around Eric Davis. Now, this, I don't think you can ignore something like this because the person that has said it, but I'll play it for you. And some of you know what I'm going to be showing, but I'll play it for you so you can at least keep this in the back of your mind. I'm not saying it completely, discredits or supports what Eric Davis is saying, but I think it needs to be considered. So this was from an interview that Travis Taylor, who is featured in The Age of Disclosure, this was an interview that he gave John Greenwald Jr. of the Black Vault a couple of years ago in 2022.
Yes, Eric has a tendency to accept and believe stories from pseudo-credible, because of where they come from. Then he assumes what they're telling him is a credible story without getting the background data to prove their story. Like if I told Eric that the moon, that there were aliens on the moon, Eric would probably believe me, right? And I don't mean that as a discredit to Eric. Eric is he's trustworthy, very, very trustworthy of people that he trusts. So I think what Eric needs to do is find a better way to show proof than simply the stories.
Some would call that a red flag. Now, weird comments that Travis made there, basically saying, in summary for me, that Eric has a tendency of being credulous, yet that credulity does not discredit Eric Davis. Now, that may be true in the context of Eric Davis, incredibly intelligent, has made some valuable contributions to his field. Does that comment from Travis Taylor automatically, negate all of Eric Davis's work and claims? I don't think you can make that broad brushstroke assumption, but it is a comment that you have to keep in the back of your mind. According to Travis Taylor, who is also featured in The Age of Disclosure, who was the chief scientist for the UAP task force under Jay Stratton's leadership, is basically saying that Eric Davis believes a lot of the things that he is told, that he has a degree of credulity. Now, is that a concern? For some folks, probably not. For others, I think you at least can't ignore those comments from Travis Taylor. You have to keep it up your sleeve. So another thing that I found interesting, so Eric Davis also made a claim that he had 2 telephone calls with President Bush 1, on UFOs and the Holloman case. Now, the Holloman case is hotly debated. I know that a lot of folks, that there was video footage that was in the documentary UFOs Past, Present, and Future, I believe, that was narrated by, was it Rob Serling? That footage that was included, 8 seconds of footage that was included in the documentary, turned out to be a fighter jet, just a prosaic aircraft, man-made aircraft. Now, others have said that, well, the footage, the 8 seconds of footage that was included in that documentary was actually just used for recreational purposes, or to kind of, sell the story that they were presenting in that documentary, that the real footage has never seen the light of day. Is that true? I don't know. I think there's a lot more to the story and the claim of Eric Davis having been in communication with President Bush 1. And if there is, I'd hope that supporting information and evidence on that claim would come to light in the not too distant future. I mean, we know that the New York Post reported on it. They reported on the fact that President Bush had, talked about the Holloman case, and that those that know the Holloman case, it was alleged that a UFO landed at Holloman. Beings exited their craft and were in contact with the military presence on the base. Just a mind-boggling story. And again, you kind of have to, you can't ignore Travis Taylor's comments completely there. That he said, again, I'm prepared to, note it, mark it in there. I can't do anything with it, and just keep a mental note of what Eric Davis has claimed in the documentary, but also what Dr. Travis Taylor has said about Eric Davis as well. A few other things in the documentary. There was no acknowledgement of ARO. So the Pentagon's congressionally mandated investigatory body on UAP. Why was there no recognition or acknowledgement of ARO as the current investigatory body? Now, is it because of the perception of ARO and its former leadership, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick? Maybe. I don't know. I did find that when I was watching it, Gary Nolan was one of the subjects interviewed, and when his name and title popped up on screen, I found it interesting, and someone else had pointed out that it actually confirmed in writing as his title that he was an advisor to ATIP. Now, I wasn't aware of that. That was news to me. So others might think, well, I knew that, but I wasn't aware of that. So I found that to be an interesting breadcrumb that I was aware of before, and I'd love to learn a bit more about that. At the end, Elizondo's use of the word imminent. That was a weird one to include there. Now, granted, the interview that Elizondo did with Dan Farah for the documentary may have been shot a couple of years ago. It may have been a bit of a subtle plug for his book, Imminent. Or was the use of the word imminent more in the context of, there's something looming? Because we've heard of Chris Bledsoe talk about something happening in April 2026. We've heard from Elizondo himself, John Ramirez, Anjali talk about something happening in 2027. Was that the context for him using the word imminent? Or was it in specific reference to his book, which had not been released, possibly at the time that he did his interview with Dan Farah? So those are my thoughts, folks. Overall, again, I thought it was incredibly well done. I would encourage as many people to watch it if they're not aware of, they're not engaged in the topic, at least to gain a very high-level overview of where the topic is at, how seriously it's been taken within the United States. And what is interesting to note is that a lot of people will kind of balk over the sticker price of $38.50. Well, in Australia we pay top price for everything, but given the fact that it sounds like there were plans for the Age of Disclosure to have maybe a theatrical release across the continental United States and maybe secure a distribution deal with a Netflix or some other streaming service. And the fact that it was then had to be self-released by Dan Farah himself and secure a deal with Amazon Prime, well, maybe it's just a fact that producers sunk a lot of money into the film and they do want to seek a return on their investment. And that's Amazon Prime as well. They would have obviously needed to cut a deal with Dan Farah, no doubt. And, when, it's no different for Netflix or Foxtel. If there's a brand new cinematic release that's come out a week or 2 weeks ago, and I want to get a first release, I want to see it, not in theaters, but I want to see it as soon as I can at home on my big screen, you're going to pay $29, $30 or $25 for a brand new film, a first release. So for me, it wasn't really an issue that it was $38.50. I mean, I would have been prepared to pay it, anyway. Some may not be able to afford it, and that's completely fair. So, but I would say to you, well, it's not going to be $38.50 forever. There will come a time when it probably is free, if it's free to watch if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, or it may even get released to other streaming platforms. You don't know. But what I find incredibly encouraging is this little fella. Anyone knows what that is, knows that it's the Oscar statue for the Academy Awards. The reason why I show you this on screen is because the age of disclosure is eligible for an Oscar nomination. And this is not just me telling this. This is on the Oscars website, the 98th Academy Awards, eligible for consideration in the documentary feature film category. The fourth one listed there is the age of disclosure. And it's obviously, it's quite a significant long list of documentary films that are eligible. So this doesn't automatically mean that the age of disclosure is going to secure an Oscar nomination. But you can bet your bottom dollar, if it does get an Oscar nod, that is going to expose, I don't know how many people, millions maybe, to the UAP topic, because the Oscars, when they get broadcast, that goes out to millions and millions of people worldwide. And a lot of folks like to watch the documentary films that are nominated for the Oscars. So if the age of disclosure got an Oscar nod, you can bet your bottom dollar that you're going to get a massive wave of people that were largely uninformed and unaware of this topic before that are going to be interested potentially and engaged on it. So I personally, I would love to see it get an Oscar nomination. And I say that selfishly, in the sense that I would love to see more people that are uninformed and unengaged on this topic become interested, because the more voices I think that you have in this subject that are asking these serious questions that we all have. For me, why isn't Australia taking this topic seriously? You have more people asking those questions. I think that's a good thing. So those were my thoughts, folks. I would love to get your thoughts. Let's have a look at some of the comments that you had. I know we're coming towards the end, and we're gonna get under 3 hours. I'm determined to do it. In Victoria, please, Grant, get Bill Chalker down here. certainly try. Yes, Research Day in the National Archives, State Library in New South Wales. Get yourself to the library of the National Archives, and if you've got something that you want to research or documents that you want to look at, get on site and do a document review. Many thanks, Telekinetic, for your generosity. Much appreciated, my friend. Didn't need to provide a donation, but it is greatly appreciated. So thank you for your ongoing support and generosity this evening. Beck's comments: I thought Lou was extremely talented in conveying his message and expressing himself. I agree. At times, the commentary felt a little bit scripted. I thought that at times Jay Stratton and even Lou came across as a little bit scripted, really not conversational. Now that may have been who knows how many takes they'd done. They wanted to, get their point across in a concise, articulate manner. Who knows? Documentaries, there's often a core theme that they want to kind of they want to get across. So it wouldn't surprise me if it was scripted, but it just at times came across a little bit wooden, the way that they were talking about. Logan, good to see you, my friend. Thank you for tuning in via X. Aaron, watched The Age of Disclosure and loved it. Found it very inspiring. I felt like this could move the needle, especially for the normies out there. I wonder if there's going to be a sequel. Yeah, I agree with you. It totally could get so many more people interested and exposed to this topic, and almost feels like there would be an opportunity for a sequel. Point in fact, I haven't listened to Jay Stratton. Sorry, not Jay Stratton. I haven't listened to Dan Farah yet. I haven't watched his interview with Joe Rogan, but apparently one of his future projects is to do a series on Jay Stratton's work in this, as it pertains to the UAP topic, his work obviously for the UAP task force and prior, and he's also working on another project that's remote viewing focused. So he's certainly got a few other projects up his sleeve. Sequel will focus on experiences. I think there's certainly an opportunity for the experiencer voice to be to be heard, because it really has been silent thus far. Telekinetic UAP Gerb also has some great points regarding the lack of examination regarding black funding and the various retrieval teams from Army and Navy, subsets and other research groups for black engineering. UAP Gerb, incredible researcher, does a lot of massive deep dives. Sometimes you need to have a bit of a dictionary next to you when he goes through it, but incredible researcher. Logan, that was the question I asked. Why was, if you ask me why I think ORSAP was left out of it, I posited that maybe it was a strategic decision, much like it may have been a strategic decision to leave ORSAP out of the New York Times article because of the baggage that ORSAP has attached to it. The woo, the Skinwalker Ranch, it wasn't just about UAP, from a military perspective, which is what Lou Elizondo's ATIP was all about. It also had the civilian aspect. It had consciousness. It had a whole lot of other elements to it. So, they're just my thoughts on that one. Zodiac gang signs, yep, especially with Jay Stratton, David Grush would have made sense. UAP out there, the AID, age of disclosure is for normies. So ORSAP investigation is too woo for folks starting into the paranormal topic, in my humble opinion. I don't disagree. I think that certainly is a plausible explanation. Yeah, we need to start getting more evidence, especially if it's not a secret anymore. Beck, Eric Davis has some terrible social media behavior clocked, and I've red flagged this guy. Yeah, I mean, he has said some things that are interesting over the years. He said that Lou Elizondo likely embellished some of the things that he said he has done. I don't know. I mean, you go on to say Travis Taylor contradicted himself. He said he's trustworthy, but he doesn't fact check. Again, it is a good contrast. It is a good double-edged sword there. So it makes me wonder. I have a feeling, this is just my gut feeling, that Travis Taylor was kind of digging himself a hole and said that as a way of kind of getting out of, I've just painted a picture that Eric Davis is credulous and he's a bit of a gullible, bit too gullible, but I better give him some save face. So I don't know. I could be completely wrong, but that was just something that came to mind. All roads seemed to lead to Eric Davis for a while, and then he came out and stated he'd seen nothing, was only repeating things he'd heard from people who said they'd seen things. It's a good point. It's certainly a good point. Logie Berra, no mention of Ross in his big interviews. Grush Barber, but 2017 New York journos were. Again, yeah, I mean, and two, there's only so much you can fit in a documentary feature. I mean, a 3-hour film, I think is a bit of a stretch for people to sit through. What Age of Disclosure clocked in at 111 minutes, I think, just short of 2 hours. So, Aaron, think of it. Why wasn't Tom DeLonge part of the Age of Disclosure as well? That's a good point. To the Stars, yep. That kind of kicked it off in a lot of respects. The Age of Australian Disclosure, 5-minute documentary, 1 for info, 2 minutes for credits. So very true. And 2 minutes of ads, according to Jimmy. Oh, that's so true. UAP Alto Age of Disclosure, great summary and primer for people who knew the topic. UAP topic had some new names for me, and my hair is very grey on this topic, worth a watch. It's true. There were some folks that I certainly wasn't aware of before. I did enjoy hearing from Jay Stratton, even Hal Puthoff, building on what he said over the years, Marco Rubio, and obviously Eric Davis. Jay Stratton did not blink once the whole time in the documentary. Skywatch signals Lou is disinfo. There are certainly many out there that believe that to be true, and there are certainly many out there that don't believe that to be true. So everyone will reach their own conclusion based on what is put out there. Well, folks, that is everything that I wanted to cover off on with you. We're going to reach under 3 hours. I'm just going to wrap up with something that I've been working on, a special announcement that I hope you will all find interesting. A lot of folks, friends and colleagues have encouraged me for quite a while now and suggested that I create a website to document my research, activism, advocacy on the UAP topic, and some of the key FOIA documents that I've been to secure for release through FOIA. So I am pleased to introduce that the unexplainedrundown.com is now live. You can access it on whatever device you want to leverage. I'll just give you a lightning quick preview so you can see. I'll add the link. It literally only went live today. Again, bit of a shameless plug. The old mug in the foreground about some of about really my drive and what I'm focused on. News and updates, which I'll post periodically. Latest live stream, I'll update to this one, obviously. Featured documentaries and all of the documentaries, short and longer in length that I've done. Interviews, not just on today's show, obviously, but some of the interviews on some of the other podcasts are out there. In the news, where I've been fortunate and privileged to be able to contribute to reporting on UAP in an Australian context. You can follow me for updates on X. You can listen to the Unexplained Rundown on Spotify. You can support on Patreon if you wish to go above and beyond the like, share, subscribe, which goes a long way. So like, share, subscribe if you haven't already done so. Activism, how you can activate yourself and submit a FOIA request. There are some good guides on how you can submit a FOIA request, how you can go about and find your local elected representative, the government petitions that I have, been responsible for submitting and securing signatures for. This is just what I am interested in, what drives me. You can certainly do a lot of these things yourself. FOIA documents, featured FOIA document, which you can access with a AI summary courtesy of Gemini. And obviously the old merch store if you prefer to wear some of the Unexplained Rundown apparel. And how you can reach out to me, I'm no qualms in having my Proton Mail email address out there. If you have a tip or a lead that you want to share with me securely, you can reach out to me on Signal. Just drop me an email first. Or if you want to reach out to me on Twitter, you absolutely can. So that is the website, folks. Do check it out. I will, this obviously is my main way of sharing updates with you on my channel, The Unexplained Rundown. But do feel free to check out the website. I'll be updating it frequently, so you can check it out if it's of interest. That's everything, folks. We're 30 seconds away from 3 hours. As always, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate all of your comments, questions, your generosity. Look forward to seeing you on another episode of The Unexplained Rundown. So enjoy the rest of your week. Stay safe. Have a great upcoming weekend, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks again.
If you have enjoyed this episode of The Unexplained Rundown, please consider giving it a thumbs up, sharing with your friends, family, colleagues, and social network, as well as subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to be notified whenever The Unexplained Rundown goes live, premieres, or posts a new video, be sure to ring that cowbell.